In a world of gilded halls and opulent gatherings, a young man with striking blue eyes stands apart from the nobles, a faint, determined smile gracing his lips. He is surrounded by figures of great power and influence, from a stern man with a magnificent mustache to a woman with flowing blonde hair. Yet his journey will be uniquely his own. This is the stage upon which a story of skills, betrayal, and a singular misunderstood power will unfold. A young woman, her face a mask of anxious confusion, wonders about a peculiar skill, one that seems to only cause trouble for people. It's called Monster Attractor, a high-level ability that sounds more like a curse than a blessing. She questions its utility, completely unaware of the young man who will soon change her perspective. In a bustling town square, a confident young merchant makes an offer to a timid woman, his hand extended in a gesture of goodwill. He proposes to buy her Monster Attractor skill for a staggering 1 million, an offer that leaves her utterly speechless. With a polite bow and a thank you, the deal is struck, marking the beginning of his strange enterprise. A negotiation is finalized, two hands clasping to seal the pact between the buyer and seller. The young man has successfully purchased the Monster Attractor skill, a power most would consider a dangerous liability. This transaction is but one of many in his quest to understand the true nature of skills. A young man kneels before a simple village woman, his posture respectful and earnest. He appears to be making a heartfelt plea or a serious offer, his backpack suggesting he is a traveler on a long journey. The woman listens intently, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. A woman holds a pouch heavy with coin, her face alight with disbelief and joy at the amount she has just received. The young man who paid her looks on, his expression calm and satisfied. He explains that it would be good to have her skills appraised at the church as well, offering sound advice along with his payment. Carrying a heavy pack, the young man navigates a crowded street, his voice ringing out with a clear and confident purpose. He announces his trade to the curious onlookers, offering to purchase any skills that their owners find useless or bothersome. The people of the town gather around, their faces a mix of skepticism and intrigue. In a vibrant marketplace, a young boy happily follows his mother, completely unaware of the unique business being conducted nearby. The young skill trader calls out to the crowd, encouraging anyone to feel free to reach out with any kind of skill. He assures them that no ability is too strange or too weak for his consideration. The traveler, laden with a large backpack, addresses a small group of villagers in the market, his hand gesturing emphatically as he explains his business. He encourages them to reach out with any inquiries, making it clear he is open to all offers. His presence creates a small stir among the locals, who are unaccustomed to such a strange proposition. A dual image captures the essence of a young man, showing two sides of a single soul. On one side he is a wide-eyed innocent boy, perhaps a reflection of his past self. On the other he is a confident and smiling youth, his gaze knowing and determined, hinting at the profound changes he has undergone. A hand gently holds a ripe, red apple, the sunlight catching its perfect sheen. Ivy climbs the wall in the background, suggesting a tranquil, perhaps nostalgic setting. This simple fruit is a symbol of a past attempt, a memory of a time when his unique power was a complete and utter mystery. In this world, skills are not earned. They are blessings granted to all by the gods from the moment of birth. A divine hand is depicted bestowing a shimmering star of power upon two supplicants, an act of creation that defines the very fabric of their society. These abilities are a fundamental aspect of existence. They are an everyday occurrence, woven into the lives of everyone from the strongest laborer to the smallest child. In a peaceful village, people go about their day, their innate skills guiding their work and interactions. This system of divine gifts is the unshakable foundation of their reality. A burly man effortlessly hoists a heavy sack, his status screen displaying his practical skills like strength and sturdy. Nearby, a mother and her young son walk together, their own abilities, such as swiftness and concealment, floating visibly beside them. In this world, a person's talents are on full display for all to see. From a distance, a woman proudly points out her own child to a neighbor, boasting about his impressive array of skills, which include loud voice and swordsmanship. The two women by the well listen, their conversation typical of parents comparing their children's God-given gifts. A young boy with dark, spiky hair and a determined set to his jaw struggles to lift a wooden bucket from the well. His status is starkly different from the others. A single lonely skill hovers beside him, trading, level 1. His downcast eyes and the slight frown on his lips reveal his deep disappointment with his meager blessing. The gossiping women don't bother to lower their voices as he passes, openly mocking him as the boy with the useless skill. They loudly thank the heavens that their own children were not so cursed. The boy clenches his teeth in frustration, muttering under his breath that he can hear them, his humiliation palpable. Later he is cornered by a group of bullies who sneer at his abilities, claiming that skills like tailing and clairvoyance are only for criminals. The largest of the boys points a finger at him, demanding he stay out of the village. Despite being outnumbered, the boy stands his ground, his eyes flashing with defiance as he challenges them to bring it on. The confrontation quickly turns violent as a bully, with a cruel grin, throws a powerful punch. He viciously taunts the boy, calling him nothing more than his sister's leftover scraps. The blow lands with a sickening impact, a physical manifestation of the village's contempt. Defeated and bruised, the boy walks alone up a hill overlooking the village, the vast, empty sky mirroring his own sense of helplessness. He grimly reflects on the futility of his struggle. In the end, he knows he can never win a physical fight against someone who possesses a strength skill. He finally reaches his home, a quaint little house set apart from the rest of the village. As he pushes the door open, he announces his return to his sister, his thoughts a mix of pain and resolve. He tells himself that no matter what skill he has, at least it's better than one that is completely and utterly useless. Inside, his sister sits at her desk, bathed in the soft light from the window, cherry blossoms drifting past outside. Her status screen is a breathtaking sight, a long list of skills all at level 20. Appraisal, drawing, dexterity, memorization, astronomy, medicine, and more. She is a true prodigy, a stark contrast to her brother. She turns to him with a warm smile, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulder, and welcomes her beloved little brother home. He notices the art supplies on her desk, his own pain momentarily forgotten as he asks if she was drawing something. She proudly presents her latest work, a beautifully rendered portrait of the two of them, their drawn faces beaming with happiness. Her eyes are filled with affection as she playfully asks why he isn't saying anything. He looks at the drawing, a small blush on his cheeks, and admits that, as always, it's very good. The happy moment fades as she notices the fresh cuts on his face. He looks away, his expression somber, and confesses that the bullies called him her leftover scraps again. Her smile vanishes, replaced by a cold fury as she calls them cruel for hurting her beloved brother. He hangs his head in shame, lamenting that he only has a single skill that isn't good for anything, while she possesses 10 brilliant talents. He repeats the villagers' sentiment that it's a waste for someone of her caliber to stay in such a place, reinforcing his own feelings of worthlessness. A memory surfaces of the day his fate was sealed. He remembers the town appraiser looking at the results, utterly baffled. The man had never even heard of a skill called trading, leaving the young boy confused and uncertain about his future. The official appraisal document confirmed it. He possessed only a single skill, trading. As a child, he had tried desperately to make it work, attempting to sell a simple apple, but the skill remained inert. The realization that his one gift was a mystery he couldn't solve was a crushing blow. He recalls returning home to his parents, his face a mask of dejection as he informed them that his skill didn't work again. His parents stood in the background, their disappointment palpable, his mother letting out a weary sigh. Their lack of comfort only deepened his despair. The memory is a painful one. His parents had deemed him a complete disappointment, his skill utterly worthless. They had harbored such high hopes that he would be a prodigy just like his sister, and his failure was something they could not accept. He remembers his sister trying to intervene, her expression bright with a hopeful idea. She reminded their parents of the money they had saved from her drawings, suggesting they could all buy a nice house in the capital and leave the village together as a family. But their parents' plan did not include him. In response to their cold dismissal, his sister immediately wrapped her arms around him protectively. She declared firmly that she would stay in the village, choosing to remain with her little brother over a life of luxury with them. His parents had callously told her to come live with them, stating there was no point in worrying about her useless, talentless brother. Overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow, the boy had tried to push his sister away, insisting there was no value in staying with someone like him. She had held him even tighter, her voice soft but unwavering as she looked at him with pure, unconditional love. She had asked him a question that silenced all his doubts. What, she wondered, could possibly be more valuable than getting to live with her beloved little brother? Back in the present, a year has passed since their parents abandoned them. He clenches his fist, the bruises on his face a fresh reminder of his struggles. Despite everything, despite all the time that has gone by, his trading skill has not activated even a single time. He recalls his sister's gentle encouragement as she tended to his wounds in the past. She had advised him to take things slowly and to try out different methods, but to always avoid those that involved fighting. She carefully applies a special ointment to his cheek, a concoction she created herself using her high-level pharmaceutic skill. Her touch is gentle, her focus entirely on healing the injuries he sustained, protecting her honor. He looks at her, a deep sense of envy and admiration in his eyes. He half-jokingly tells her she should just give him one of her skills, wishing it were possible to share her incredible blessings. An old man from the village appears at their door, calling for the sister by name. He explains that he's counting on her appraisal skill again today. As she gets up to help, her brother asks with a hint of annoyance if she's really going to do appraisals for the villagers again. He can't hide his frustration, complaining that those people are always taking advantage of her. They constantly ask for her help with appraisals but never offer anything in return, exploiting her kindness simply because she has the skill. Sensing his distress, she wordlessly pulls him into a tight, comforting embrace. She rests her head on his, silently telling him not to make such a sad face, her actions speaking louder than any words. She pulls back to look him in the eyes, her expression soft and reassuring. She promises him that she will never abandon him, no matter what. She firmly states that even if their parents and the entire village curse him for being useless, she will always believe that his skill has value. Her words are a balm to his wounded spirit. He thinks to himself that his kind-hearted sister is the only one in the entire world who is willing to stand by his side. Flustered by the affection, he tells her not to pat his head so much, though his heart is full. She straightens her dress, preparing to leave. She informs him that she might be home a little late tonight, as a relative of the village mayor is visiting. With a final take care, she heads out the door, leaving him alone in the house. He watches her go from the window, waving as she skips away cheerfully. A genuine smile spreads across his face as he playfully tells her to just hurry up and go, the brief moment of peace a treasured memory. With his sister gone for the evening, he decides to tidy up the house. He looks around the living room, which is cluttered with stacks of books and art supplies, a testament to his sister's many passions. He chuckles to himself as he begins to clean, reflecting that for all her incredible talents, cleaning is the one thing his sister is truly terrible at. His eyes land on her messy desk, where the portrait she drew of them sits proudly on display. He picks up the drawing, his expression softening as he admires the skill and love poured into it. He whispers to himself that it really is a good drawing, a small, perfect moment captured on paper. As time passes, night descends upon the village. The small house on the hill is cast in shadow, the only light coming from the moon, and a sky full of stars. A quiet stillness settles over the landscape. The boy stirs, his eyes fluttering open. He finds himself on the couch, the cleaning supplies neatly arranged nearby. He realizes with a blush that he must have fallen asleep while he was working. He sits up, noticing the darkness outside and the silence within the house. His sister still hasn't returned. A pang of worry strikes him, and deciding he should go pick her up, he grabs a small lantern to light his way. He steps out of the front door into the cool night air, but stops dead in his tracks. His eyes widen in shock and disbelief at the scene unfolding in the valley below. The tranquil night is shattered by a terrifying orange glow. The entire village is ablaze, thick plumes of black smoke choking the starry sky. The sounds of crackling fire echo ominously in the distance. From his vantage point on the hill, he has a clear view of the devastation. Every single house is engulfed in flames, the place he once called home transformed into a raging inferno. He stands frozen, the lantern in his hand trembling, his mind struggling to comprehend the horror before him. The village is burning, and his sister is somewhere within that fiery nightmare. Panic finally breaks through his shock. He screams his sister's name, his voice filled with terror, and begins to sprint down the hill towards the blazing village, his only thought to find her. As he enters the village, the path is littered with the lifeless bodies of the villagers. The fires rage around him, casting flickering, grotesque shadows on the faces of the dead. He recoils in horror, stumbling and nearly falling over a corpse. He covers his mouth, trying to stifle a gasp as the scale of the massacre becomes terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a fire, it was a slaughter. He recognizes the faces of the deceased, the bullies who had tormented him, the women who had mocked him by the well. They all lie still in pools of their own blood, their skills and their lives extinguished. Tears of fear and confusion stream down his face. He clutches his head, frantically wondering who could have done something so monstrous. His desperation grows as he realizes he has to find his sister amidst this carnage. His sister's words from earlier suddenly flash in his mind. She was visiting the mayor's house. A sliver of hope cuts through his terror, and he immediately changes direction, running towards the largest mansion in the village. He reaches the mayor's house, finding bodies strewn across the manicured lawn. He desperately tries the large wooden door and is horrified to find it unlocked. With trembling hands, he pushes it open. The sight that greets him is one of absolute butchery. The grand foyer is a blood-soaked abattoir, the bodies of the mayor's family and staff piled near the entrance. He takes a hesitant step inside, his eyes wide with terror. The sheer brutality is overwhelming, and he feels a wave of nausea wash over him as he scans the horrific scene. His gaze is drawn up the grand staircase, which is also slick with blood and littered with corpses. The gruesome tableau continues up into the shadowed recesses of the mansion. He whispers how awful it is, his voice barely a tremor. Suddenly, a pained voice from the top of the stairs begs someone to stop, asking what they are thinking. The boy's heart leaps into his throat. He recognizes the voice. It's the mayor. A desperate thought ignites within him. If the mayor is still alive, he might know where his sister is. He cautiously begins to climb the stairs, peering over the blood-soaked balustrade. He sees the mayor on his knees, pleading for his life, demanding to know why this is happening. As he gets a clearer view, he sees a figure standing over the mayor, their back to him. The figure's long blonde hair is unmistakable. He screams his sister's name, his voice cracking with a mixture of relief and dawning horror. He freezes on the steps, his mind shutting down. He forces himself not to look at the carnage around him, focusing only on his sister. He tells himself that as long as she is alive, nothing else matters. Not the parents who abandoned him, not the villagers who cursed him, not even his own useless skill. The mayor, in a final desperate plea, offers the attacker the entire village if they will just spare his life. He is willing to give up everything. The boy hears his sister's voice, but it's cold, detached, and utterly unfamiliar. She states that she has no need for something like a village that has already been destroyed. In the next moment, a spray of blood erupts as she silences the mayor for good. He can only watch in stunned silence as the mayor's headless body slumps to the floor. The swift, merciless execution leaves him completely paralyzed. His sister turns around, her pretty dress stained with blood, a serene and welcoming smile on her face. With open arms, she greets her beloved little brother, as if nothing is wrong. The camera focuses on her feet, standing in a fresh, spreading pool of crimson. The stark contrast between her delicate shoes and the gruesome scene encapsulates the nightmare he has walked into. He stammers, his voice trembling as he asks what is going on, why everyone is dead. He cannot reconcile the kind, loving girl he knows with the killer standing before him. She casually explains that she made a miscalculation. The mayor's relative, it turned out, had a high-level appraisal skill and discovered her hidden ability, plundering. Her cheerful tone makes the confession all the more monstrous. She leans in close, her face inches from his, and continues her explanation. She had been hiding her true nature, using her concealment and acting skills all this time. The boy can only whisper the word plundering, his mind reeling. She gestures dismissively at the dead bodies lining the staircase. She explains that she has already plundered all of the villagers' skills after using her appraisal to assess them. Now that she's finished, there's no point in staying here any longer. With a playful wink and her tongue stuck out, she delivers the final soul-crushing blow. She confesses with a sickeningly sweet smile that she ended up killing every single one of the villagers. The boy stumbles back in disbelief, shaking his head. This cannot be his sister, the one who was always so kind-hearted. He pleads with her, his voice cracking with fear, asking what she is saying, insisting it must be a lie. She lets out a chilling laugh, her eyes gleaming with madness. She tells him not to worry, that with her psychology skill she can tell that he thinks she's gonna kill him too. She steps towards him, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. She confirms his fear, but with a cruel twist, she won't kill him, yet. she reveals that his skill is the only one she is incapable of plundering. He asks her what she means, unable to comprehend why his useless skill would be immune. Before he can process her words, she lashes out with a powerful kick, sending him tumbling violently down the long, bloody staircase. Landing in a heap at the bottom, he looks up to see her smiling down at him, praising his very good question. She holds up a book, announcing that his big sister is now going to teach him some valuable information about the nature of skills. She begins her lesson, explaining that common skills like loud voice and detection are a dime a dozen. Her own plundering skill, however, is what is known as a rare skill. She then points directly at him, her smile widening. She reveals that his trading skill is in a class all its own, an only skill. Unlike common skills, only one person in existence can possess it at any given time, making it rarer than anything she possesses. She mockingly observes that he still has no idea how to use his power or what it even does. He can only stare back, muttering the term only skill, the weight of this new information crashing down on him. She leans in and whispers her chilling plans to him. She will travel the world to raise her plundering level, and the next time they meet, her skill will be strong enough to steal his. She points her finger at him like a pistol, her eyes burning with a terrifying ambition. She declares that she will plunder his skill and then she will kill him. Until that day comes, she commands him to polish his unique ability. He scrambles to his feet, begging his sister to wait, desperately insisting that this must all be a lie. But she is already gone, using a combination of leap, swiftness, and wind magic to vanish into the night. With a powerful gust of wind, she disappears from the hilltop, leaving nothing but a few swirling leaves in her wake. He is left utterly alone, surrounded by the dead and the dying embers of his former life. He collapses to his knees, his body shaking with grief and shock. He wonders what that skill was that she used to escape, and how she could possibly know so much about his own latent power. Denial takes hold, and he flees the massacre, running back towards the one place that still feels like a sanctuary. He tells himself over and over that it was a lie, that the person he saw wasn't his sister, and that his real, kind sister would be waiting for him at home. He bursts into their empty house, his desperate hope shattering at the sight of the quiet, lonely room. His gaze falls on the portrait she drew of them, a perfect smiling memory that now feels like a cruel joke. A single broken word escapes his lips. Why? Her final words echo in his mind, the horrific promise to kill him replaying endlessly. He falls to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he sobs, unable to understand why she would say something so terrible. He stares at the drawing, a relic of a love that he now realizes may have been a complete fabrication. He cries out her name, his voice raw with anguish, questioning the sister he thought he knew. Years have passed, but the memory remains vivid. Now a young man, he clutches a silver locket, opening it to reveal the very same portrait of him and his sister, a constant reminder of his past and his purpose. He sits in a horse-drawn wagon, traveling with a group of strangers. One of his fellow passengers notices him staring at the locket and casually asks if the girl in the picture is his girlfriend. A sad, knowing smile touches the young man's lips as he snaps the locket shut. He corrects the passenger, explaining that it's his sister, offering no further details about their tragic relationship. He turns to look out at the passing landscape, his expression distant. He admits to the stranger, almost as if thinking aloud, that even after all this time, he still finds it impossible to believe what happened that night. He quickly apologizes for talking to himself, but his mind continues to race. He silently questions why his sister, who was so kind and blessed with so many skills, would desire more to the point of murder. He wants to believe she had a reason she never shared. Looking up at the sky, his gaze hardens with resolve. He vows that he will see her again, that he needs to understand what she was thinking. He accepts that even if he ends up getting killed by her, it's a risk he must take to get answers. He clenches the locket in his hand, a new determination solidifying within him. If polishing his trading skill is the only way to meet her again, then that is what he will do. He decides it's time to get going. His journey leads him to a large, impressive building in a new city. Carrying his worn backpack, he walks up the stone steps, confident that this is the place he has been searching for. He stands before the heavy wooden door, taking a moment to compose himself. He raises his hand and knocks firmly, announcing his arrival with a clear, steady voice. With a charming and practiced smile, he presents himself to the person who opens the door. He declares that he is the skill collector, at their service. He has come to purchase any skills they don't have a use for, any of those purely useless or bothersome abilities, all while his own trading skill remains at a humble level 1. A voice from within warmly welcomes him, stating that they have been expecting him. This is where his new story begins, the story of a boy and his sister, whose lives were irrevocably changed by their skills, and the story of the many people he will meet who are troubled by the very powers they were given. He went about his business with a bright, satisfied smile, collecting skills from the various citizens in the bustling town square. This was his trade, his purpose in this new city, and he was known simply as the Collector, a welcome service for those looking to unburden themselves of unwanted abilities. He let out a contented sigh, feeling the conceptual weight of his acquisitions from the day. Today's haul was a respectable 12 skills, each one a new tool or a piece of someone's life that he could pass on to another. Sitting by the window of his quiet room, he observed the peaceful scene of children playing in the streets below, a gentle smile gracing his features. He reflected that he had grown quite accustomed to this line of work in the tranquil new city he now called home. His mind drifted back to a time when his big sister first taught him the art of his trade, surrounded by the cheerful faces of the children she cared for. It was through her unique skill collector service that he had learned to make a living by buying and selling the very essence of a person's talents. but a shadow of concern crossed his face as he returned to the present, the question of his sister's whereabouts still a heavy unanswered mystery in his heart. His thoughts were interrupted by a woman with long blonde hair, the very collector service agent he'd been meeting with, who asked if he was the one who did this work. Before he could respond, an elderly woman with an aura of immense wisdom stepped forward, her gaze sharp and focused. She requested a private audience with him, her tone leaving no room for refusal and leaving the young collector momentarily stunned and confused. He was led away from the familiar streets and brought before a grand, imposing mansion, its architecture speaking of old money and significant power. The sheer scale of the building was enough to make him feel small, a stark contrast to his humble lodgings. Now seated inside an opulent parlor, surrounded by luxurious furniture and expensive decor, he couldn't shake a feeling of profound unease. He confessed internally that it was impossible to calm down in a place so overwhelmingly lavish. Holding a delicate teacup that felt foreign in his hands, he addressed the elder sage with polite reverence, expressing his honor at being summoned. Yet he couldn't hide his confusion, asking if she was truly certain about her request to sell him nearly all of her skills. The elder sage was resolute, a spectral list of her incredible abilities floating around her: eidetic memory, speed reading, calculation, and erudition, all at an astonishing level 20. She confirmed her intent, stating plainly that she wanted him to purchase every single one of them, with the sole exception of her memory skill. The young man was taken aback, his own high-level appraisal skill confirming the immense value of what she possessed. He stammered, explaining that he could indeed see her skills, but the reality of the situation was far more complicated than simple sight. He admitted that while he had the capacity to buy them, he lacked the astronomical funds required for such a transaction. The image of a massive sack overflowing with gold coins flashed in his mind, a potent symbol of the wealth he simply did not have. The sage then made an offer that defied all logic, naming a price of a mere 100,000 for the entire collection, a sum that was laughably low. Stunned into near silence, the boy asked for her reasoning, unable to comprehend why she would offer such an unbelievably good deal. Surrounded by the towering bookshelves of her personal library, the sage explained that she had dedicated her entire existence to the pursuit of knowledge. She had reached a venerable age, and for the longest time she believed this scholarly pursuit was her ultimate purpose in life. However, as the decades wore on, she began to question if knowledge alone was truly enough for a fulfilling existence. And so she had decided to cast aside her old self entirely, and begin a new life as an adventurer, a shocking departure from her scholarly past. The sage then turned the tables, revealing she had heard that he not only buys skills but sells them as well, a fact that caught the young collector by surprise. She correctly deduced that by selling skills, he must have open slots available, which was the key to her entire plan. She elaborated on the fundamental mechanics of their world, where the number of skills a person can possess is determined by the 2 to 5 skill slots they are born with. This meant that money alone was not enough for an aspiring adventurer to acquire all the abilities they might need. With her goal laid bare, she listed the specific skills she wished to purchase from him, a collection geared entirely for combat and stealth. She requested high-level swordsmanship, physical ability, brute force, recovery, concealment, and tailing. With the terms agreed upon, a faint glow of magic enveloped their handshake, sealing the monumental deal between them. The collector's own appraisal skill confirmed the transfer was complete, a vast collection of scholarly knowledge exchanged for the raw potential of an adventurer. Just as their business concluded, a spirited young boy with fiery red hair burst into the room, his own modest adventurer skills on display. He cheerfully asked if his grandpa was finished with his talk, his youthful energy filling the stately room. The boy, the sage's grandson, excitedly announced that he was embarking on his very first adventure the next day. The collector watched him, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to click into place in his mind. The grandson explained that his dream of becoming an adventurer was sparked by the very stories his grandfather used to read to him every night. The elder sage looked on with a complex mixture of pride and regret, muttering about what a worrywart his grandson was and how he now regretted filling his head with such tales. The sage's expression hardened as he issued a stern ultimatum to the boy, declaring that if he chose this dangerous path against his wishes, he would be exiled from their home forever. The threat was severe, a desperate attempt to protect the boy from the world's dangers. The grandson, however, simply smiled through the tension, apologizing to the collector for the family drama before turning to his grandfather. He gave him a heartfelt thank you for everything, and a loving farewell, revealing to the collector that beneath the harsh exterior was a truly kind man. Once the grandson had departed, the sage turned to the collector, his demeanor shifting back to one of serious inquiry. He asked for the collector's professional opinion on the boy's skills, his gaze intense and full of a grandfather's concern. The collector sheepishly admitted that he had been appraising the boy out of professional habit, a reflex he couldn't control. He then gave his honest assessment. The grandson's skills were truly outstanding, perfectly suited for the adventuring life he so desperately wanted. A deep-seated worry was evident in the sage's weary eyes, as he confessed his greatest fear. He hoped his grandson wouldn't grow to be over-reliant on his innate talents and end up making a careless, fatal mistake. The grand mansion stood silently as the collector took his leave, the weight of the day's transactions heavy on his mind. Walking through the city streets, he mulled over the events that had transpired, his thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and suspicion. Though he had acquired a wealth of powerful skills, an unsettling feeling lingered in the back of his mind. He couldn't shake the strangeness of the sage's request, questioning why a man embarking on a new life as an adventurer would need skills like high-level concealment and tailing. The elder had seemed happy for his grandson, yet his preparations felt oddly clandestine. A dark thought crept into his mind as he pictured shadowy figures in an alleyway, their faces obscured, There was no way a respected man like the elder sage would become a criminal, but the skills he requested were undeniably suited for such a life. He reasoned that such abilities were far more fitting for a thief than for a noble adventurer, especially for someone already blessed with so much natural talent. It was then that a sudden shocking realization began to dawn on him. A fragmented memory surfaced, a conversation from his past about those who are blessed with skills, a warning he couldn't quite piece together. He knew nothing for certain, but his instincts were screaming that something was terribly wrong. He walked alone down the darkening streets, the solitary path mirroring his own isolated struggle to understand the sage's true motives. The city was quiet, offering no answers to the questions swirling in his head. Looking up at the cloudy sky, he made a firm decision. He would leave the next day, his course of action now clear. The following day, deep within a sun-dappled forest, the sage's grandson was brimming with nervous excitement. It was his party's very first expedition, a dream finally made real. His eyes lit up as he spotted their objective just ahead, a nest filled with monster eggs, the target of their collection quest. He eagerly pointed it out to his companions, their first taste of adventure just within reach. Without warning, a ferocious bird-like creature burst from the foliage, its screech echoing through the trees as it lunged for the boy. A party member yelled a desperate warning, another leaping forward to intercept the deadly attack just in the nick of time. After a swift and decisive battle, the party breathed a collective sigh of relief, the immediate danger having passed. The grandson gratefully thanked his companion for the save, a wide grin on his face as they celebrated their first successful job. But as the adrenaline faded, the grandson paused, a strange sensation prickling the back of his neck. He felt as though someone had been watching them from the shadows, though he quickly dismissed it as a figment of his imagination. Hidden amongst the dense leaves of a nearby bush, the young skill collector let out his own quiet sigh of relief, his chest tight with tension. He had been there the entire time, a silent, unseen guardian. He pushed a branch aside and stepped out from his hiding spot, his boots crunching softly on the forest floor. His eyes immediately found the other hidden figure in the woods, the elder sage who had also been watching. The collector calmly asked the old man how his grandchild had performed, his own status revealing he now possessed level 7, concealment and tailing. The sage was utterly dumbfounded, his face pale with shock and a bead of sweat tracing a path down his wrinkled temple. He had been so certain that his presence was completely undetectable. A small, knowing smile touched the collector's lips as he explained his presence, stating that he would be deeply troubled if the skills he had sold were to be abused. The bewildered sage could only ask why he was there, why he had followed them. The collector revealed his secret, explaining that he had only used 7 levels from the skills he'd purchased, leaving 23 in reserve. He then clarified that he could partially transfer skill levels, a feat the sage had never thought possible, which explained how he had so easily detected the old man's presence. The source of this incredible power was a unique skill, management, which glowed brightly on his status panel. This skill was the cornerstone of his entire operation, a powerful tool that set him apart from any other. He explained its incredible utility. It allowed him to adjust skill levels during a transaction, store abilities outside of his limited slots, and carry far more skills than a person should be able to handle. The sage, finally understanding the depth of the collector's power, asked if he intended to continue shadowing his grandson. The collector confirmed that he would, for as long as his body could endure it. The old man found this level of dedication to be excessively overprotective, but the collector's gaze was firm. He declared his resolve to watch over the boy every single day, before turning the question back on the sage, asking why he himself would go to such extreme lengths. A profound sadness washed over the sage's face, his eyes filled with a lifetime of regret. He confessed that this was his penance, his way of atoning for his past failures to his family. His story began decades ago, a time when he was so utterly consumed by his own skills and his thirst for knowledge that he had no consideration left for his loved ones. As a younger man, he was a prodigy, his mind a fortress built of high-level intellectual skills. But it was never enough. He relentlessly pursued more and more knowledge, driven by a deep-seated belief that he was worthy of possessing it all. His obsession knew no bounds, leading him to abandon his home at night in search of more books, more information to consume. He would return home to a family that felt more like strangers, their welcomes and affections failing to penetrate the fortress of his academic ambition. For many years, his family was a mere formality, a backdrop to his true passion. He was so detached that he barely registered the news of his own daughter's impending marriage. He admitted with deep shame that he cared nothing for his wife or his daughter's new family. His singular focus on reading every book in every neighboring country. His life became a blur of turning pages, one library after another, his blessing of skills twisting into a self-imposed curse of isolation. It was only after he had consumed nearly all there was to read that he finally paused, struck by a hollow, existential dread. He looked at the vast knowledge he had accumulated and wondered what it was all for. Unopened letters from his family lying ignored on his desk. The devastating realization hit him like a physical blow. Knowledge was not meant for oneself, but to be shared with and used for someone precious. A frantic urgency seized him, and he raced back to his home, a desperate need to return consuming him. But when he arrived, he was met not with a happy reunion, but with his ailing daughter. She looked at him with tired, resentful eyes, her voice weak as she asked why he had chosen to return only now, after so much time had passed. She recounted the tragedy that had befallen them in his absence. An epidemic had claimed the lives of her mother and her husband, leaving only her and her newborn child. She added with a bitter tone that he probably didn't even care. Crushed by the weight of his negligence, the sage collapsed to his knees, begging for a forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. His daughter simply stood and watched, her expression unreadable. Tears of unbearable guilt streamed down his face as the full scope of his failure became clear. His daughter then delivered the final blow, telling him that her own time was also running out. In her final moments, she gave him one last chance at redemption, telling him that if he truly wished to atone, he must dedicate his life to her son, his grandchild. He could only weep, branding himself a fool of a father. The heartbreaking memory ended with him holding his tiny grandson's hand, vowing to protect him. He explained to the collector that his daughter passed away soon after, leaving him with a regret that would never fade. From that day forward, he had dedicated every fiber of his being to raising the boy, filling his life with the love and attention he had denied his own daughter. He told the collector that he would gladly sell off every skill he had ever acquired, because there was only one he truly needed now. The skill that allowed him to cherish the memories of his family was the only one that mattered. Clutching his heart, he declared that the skill memory was all he required to hold on to the faces and precious time he had with his loved ones. The collector's mind flashed to his own sister and the children she cared for, a profound understanding dawning on him. He knew all too well that there were some memories, some people, that you could never bear to forget. An idea sparked in his mind and he told the sage he had a special, spare skill he'd been saving. He asked if the old man had an empty slot, suggesting it might be the key to his predicament. Intrigued, the sage listened as the collector described a unique and expensive skill, one that would grant him the ability to watch over his grandchild for the rest of his life. The collector issued a stark warning. The skill was so high level, so powerful, that purchasing it would require the sage to give up his entire fortune. But the collector already knew the old man's answer before he even spoke, a small, knowing smile on his face. The sage met his gaze with a look of unwavering determination, his choice already made. And with that, a second, even more profound deal was sealed, a quiet understanding passing between the two men under the canopy of the forest. Back in the city, the grandson's adventuring party chattered excitedly about a potential new member who wanted to join their ranks. Nearby, the skill collector sat calmly reading a newspaper, feigning indifference. The grandson suddenly pointed towards the street, announcing the newcomer's arrival with a cheerful shout. A young man with familiar-looking silver hair approached the group, apologizing politely for the delay. He introduced himself as Lu, assuring them that he wouldn't be any trouble. The grandson welcomed him warmly, joking that for a young man he sounded remarkably like his old grandpa. The collector glanced up from his paper, a smirk on his face as he read about a rare elven skill called Youthful Mask. He mused to himself that the elder sage had done a fine job integrating into the party. The paper explained that at level 50, the skill could make the user appear 50 years younger, though it was merely an illusion. The elder sage hadn't regained his physical youth, only its appearance, all to stay by his grandson's side. He watched as the sage, now in his youthful guise as Lu, laughed alongside his grandson, a genuine warmth between them. The collector felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing the old man had found the perfect skill for his needs. A genuine smile spread across the collector's face. He was truly happy for them, seeing the fractured family find a new, albeit unconventional way to be together. As he walked through the crowded city streets later, he made a mental note to restock the youthful mask skill. Suddenly he was jolted from his thoughts by a small commotion as a frail-looking girl tripped and fell hard onto the cobblestones, spilling her basket of flowers everywhere. He rushed to her side, instinctively asking if she was all right. He looked down at her face, noticing her large, sorrowful eyes and the dirt smudged on her cheek. She coughed weakly into her hand, offering a quiet apology and thanking him for his concern as he helped her up. Her gaze fell upon the scattered and bruised flowers, her shoulders slumping in despair as she lamented that she needed to sell them. The collector gently told her not to worry about it. She looked up at him, confused by his calm demeanor, insisting that the flowers were ruined. But he simply knelt down, assuring her that they were still fine enough to sell. With a kind and reassuring smile that seemed to momentarily chase the sadness from her eyes, he made a surprising offer. He told her that he would like to purchase every single one of her flowers. The girl's eyes widened in utter disbelief, a faint blush rising in her cheeks as she found herself holding a bouquet of all her flowers, saved from ruin by this kind stranger's generosity. The young girl selling flowers on the side of the cobblestone street could not believe what she was hearing. A kind-faced boy, a traveler by the looks of his pack, was offering to purchase her entire stock of flowers. With a warm and reassuring smile, he confirmed his intentions, and the girl's face completely lit up with a mixture of shock and overwhelming joy. She stammered out her profound thanks, immediately busying herself with wrapping the bouquets for her unexpected benefactor. As she clutched the flowers to her chest, a silent, unseen status revealed the truth of her miserable existence. She was afflicted with a trio of debilitating negative skills, bad luck, sickness, and a weak constitution. A curse that explained her frail appearance and the desperation in her eyes. The traveler, known only as the collector, observed her quietly, his unique ability allowing him to see these hidden attributes. He had seen countless skills in his line of work, but he mused internally that it was exceptionally rare to find someone burdened with such a purely unfortunate combination. His mind flashed back to his own business principles, recalling how even the most undesirable, negative skills could find purpose in the right hands. He made it his business to acquire such things for his collector's service, and this girl's plight presented a perfect, if somber, opportunity. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes as she explained that this single act of kindness meant her younger brother and sister would finally have food to eat for the day. The collector looked at her more closely, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, and gently asked if she had even managed to sleep. His heart ached with a sudden sharp pang of empathy as he was reminded of his own past struggles, of his own sister drawing pictures late into the night just so they could make ends meet. Looking at the pittance she had, he knew he couldn't possibly accept the massive profit he had just made from their earlier transaction. He stepped forward, holding out a thick stack of bills, explaining to the bewildered girl that he had come into a great deal of money recently and felt compelled to share his good fortune with her. Her eyes widened at the sight of more money than she had likely ever held in her life. As he pressed the cash into her hand, a soft glow enveloped them for a moment, signifying that a transaction far more significant than a simple purchase had just been completed. The deal was sealed, leaving the young flower girl utterly speechless and confused by the sudden turn of events. He told her to think of the money as a good luck charm, a small boost for her future business endeavors. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she tried to thank him again, but he was already turning to walk away down the bustling city street. As she watched him go, a new reality settled upon her, unseen but deeply felt. The collector had just traded her a brand new skill, Good Luck Level 1, the conditions for the exchange, mutual consent and monetary compensation, having been perfectly met. He glanced down at his own hand, feeling the weight of the new acquisitions that now resided within him. He had successfully taken on her sickness and weak constitution, absorbing the very curses that had plagued her young life. It was a cheap price to pay for 3 new skills, he thought to himself, a worthy exchange. He had sold her the good luck skill to balance the trade, and he sincerely hoped she would find her new life more to her liking. He held the bouquet of flowers he had just purchased, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the grim nature of his work. Walking away from the market square, he pondered what to bring his friend as a gift on his upcoming visit. He decided the flowers would do nicely. Even if they were a little worn from the street, their pleasant scent was still strong. His journey took him through a quieter part of the town, past stalls with various goods hanging from wooden racks. He continued to browse the market, thinking that some practical necessities would be a good addition to the gift. With the weather growing colder, he also wisely decided that it would be best to have some medicine on hand, just in case. His arms were soon laden with bags, and he chuckled to himself, realizing he may have gotten a bit carried away with his shopping. Just then, a familiar voice called out to him, and an older woman from a nearby stall recognized him as the collector. The woman's face was beaming with gratitude as she thanked him for a transaction they'd had the other day. She reminded him that he had purchased her monster attraction skill, a burden she was clearly glad to be rid of. She excitedly recounted how her life had transformed since their deal, explaining that the constant monster attacks had finally ceased. This newfound peace allowed her to travel outside the town to stock up on ingredients, a crucial step toward realizing her lifelong dream of opening a diner. With a proud and joyful gesture, she pointed to a handsome 2-story building just down the street. She declared that her new inn and diner would be opening soon on the first floor of that very building. She was nearly overcome with emotion, thanking the collector again and again, crediting him entirely for her success. He simply looked on, pleased that he could help, as she mentioned that her next challenge was finding some staff for the new establishment. In a moment of inspiration, she thrust a recruitment flyer into his hands, cheekily suggesting that he would look quite dashing in a waiter's apron. He politely declined, explaining that his hands were already quite full with the demands of his unique collector service. The innkeeper sighed, saying it was a shame but encouraged him to pass the flyer along if he met anyone looking for a job. The collector accepted the paper, though he felt a bit troubled by the request, unsure of what he would do with it. As he walked on, he once again spotted the young flower girl across the square, and a thought began to form in his mind. He initially dismissed it, thinking his secluded friend wasn't suited for a job that involved dealing with people. He then saw she was not alone. Her 2 small siblings were with her, their faces bright and happy as they held onto their share of the flowers. He watched as the girl calmly explained to them that she was the one tasked with the errand, a small moment of quiet maturity. His gaze softened as he watched her gently pat her younger brother on the head, a simple, loving gesture. He was reminded of her desperate words from earlier, about how this money would feed them, and he saw the truth of her responsibility firsthand. Another customer approached the girl, asking to purchase a bouquet, and she greeted him with a professional and cheerful demeanor. She recognized the collector standing nearby and gave him a bright smile before turning back to her siblings, reminding them to be careful with the flowers. The collector, surprised she remembered him so clearly, asked her directly. She responded with a radiant smile, confirming that of course she did, and added that she was so happy he had been pleased with her flowers. He watched her expertly handle the sale, his mind turning over the flyer in his hand. He noted how conscientious and naturally skilled she was with customers, a perfect fit for a job in a diner. He finally decided to act, stepping forward and calling out to get her attention. He hesitated for just a moment, hoping he was making the right choice. He held out the flyer to her, explaining that it was for a part-time job that had just become available. The girl took the paper, her eyes widening in surprise as she read the words printed on it. Her surprise quickly morphed into pure, unadulterated excitement. She exclaimed that she would absolutely love the job, revealing that she had been desperately looking for work just now. She went on to explain, with a look of wonder, that her terrible asthma had miraculously cleared up recently. She attributed it to the bad luck he sold her, a slight misremembering of their transaction, but the result was undeniable, as evidenced by the good luck skill now active in her status. She added that she didn't understand how, but she'd also stop being so clumsy, no longer falling or bumping into things nearly as much as she used to. The collector listened, taking in the true life-altering impact that his skill trading could have on people. Seeing that his work here was done, he stated that it was time for him to leave before sunset. He had a friend he still needed to visit. Panicked at his sudden departure, the girl quickly asked for his name, wanting to properly know the person who had bought her flowers, and found her a job all in one day. He offered a small enigmatic smile, introducing himself not by a personal name, but by his title. He was simply a traveling peddler, known to the world as the Collector. She watched his figure retreat down the street, clutching the precious job flyer and her basket of flowers. The young girl was left to wonder if her path would ever cross with the mysterious Collector again. The scene shifts dramatically, leaving the warm city behind for the harsh, biting cold of a remote mountain range. The peaks are covered in a thick blanket of pristine white snow, signaling a long journey has been made. A closer view reveals a forest of barren trees, their branches heavy with ice and snow under a pale wintry sky. The air here is thin and frigid, a place of deep isolation. The Collector finally arrives at his destination, a small solitary log cabin, nestled deep within the unforgiving wilderness. He remarks on the difficulty of the trail, even with his specialized skill products, and calls out a familiar greeting to the cabin's inhabitant. From the side of the cabin, a figure is seen mid-motion, bringing a heavy axe down with immense force. The log beneath it splits instantly, the raw power of the individual on full display. The camera focuses on the person's feet, which are bare against the freezing snow, calloused and strong. This small detail speaks volumes about their incredible toughness and adaptation to this brutal environment. The figure turns, revealing a man with long wild black hair and a rugged physique, who greets the Collector in return. He notices the bouquet of flowers and immediately teases his friend, asking if they were a gift for a woman. The man playfully grabs the Collector's arm, warning him not to get into any criminal trouble over a woman. The Collector, unfazed, simply clarifies that the gift's recipient is in fact a girl. The man's playful demeanor fades, replaced by a look of serious hope. He asks the Collector if he can bother him for the usual, stating that he feels this time, it might finally work. A gentle smile touches the Collector's lips, as he confirms that this was the very reason for his long journey. The gift was merely an incidental bonus. He thinks to himself that this rugged man is one of the very few people he considers a true friend. The two of them stand in the quiet, snowy clearing outside the lonely cabin. The Collector's internal monologue explains that this man is a long-time regular client, and a dear friend. A dramatic close-up frames the rugged man's intense, determined face. The narration concludes with a stunning revelation. Despite his obvious and immense physical power, the world has given this man a cruel and dismissive label, unskilled. The Collector confirmed that this longtime regular of his was indeed the reason for his visit to this remote, snow-covered cabin. The rugged man, weathered by time and the elements, sat on a simple tree stump, his gaze expectant. He asked the Collector if he could bother him for the usual service, a request that had become a familiar somber ritual between them. With a heavy heart, the Collector agreed, seeing the desperate hope that never seemed to fade from his friend's eyes. The man, covered in old scars and simple furs, instructed him to go ahead and use his skill. A sense of weary resignation settled over the Collector as he prepared to perform the inevitable heartbreaking task. The older man closed his eyes, his entire body tense with anticipation as he commanded the Collector to activate his appraisal skill. He sat perfectly still, awaiting the verdict that he had chased for decades, a verdict he desperately hoped would one day change. The air grew still, the silence broken only by the soft crunch of snow underfoot. But the Collector's expression betrayed the result before a single word was spoken, his face a mask of quiet sorrow. The man's shoulders slumped as he immediately understood, apologizing for what he had put his friend through. He noted with a sad smile that the Collector's face said it all, the answer being the same as it always was. Trying to shift the heavy atmosphere, the man gestured towards the cabin, explaining he had recently taken up some art. He revealed he had been carving small figures and offered one to the Collector as a gift. It was a small, crudely carved wooden bear, a simple token of their long and unusual friendship. As the Collector accepted the small figurine, the man reminded him of the truth he had shared long ago, the source of his lifelong struggle. He was one of the unskilled, a person born into the world with a 1 in 1,000 defect that prevented him from ever awakening a skill. This cruel twist of fate was the foundation of his relentless, and perhaps hopeless, pursuit. The man looked at him with an expression of profound understanding, knowing the Collector was unable to sell him any skills. He knew it was not for a lack of trying or a lack of kindness on the Collector's part. The truth was simply that he would never be able to awaken any abilities on his own. The Collector's silence confirmed the grim reality. The man didn't have any skill slots. All of his monumental effort, his decades of grueling training and unwavering belief were ultimately a waste. Every swing of his sword, every monster slain, could never bridge the fundamental gap he was born with. Yet despite this crushing revelation, the man's eyes burned with an unquenchable fire. He declared with absolute conviction that he would not give up, that he would continue to strive to awaken his own skill against all odds. His spirit was utterly unbreakable, a testament to a will forged in absolute adversity. The Collector saw that the man's passion had not diminished in the slightest. He still had the exact same fiery, determined eyes as he did on the day they first met so many years ago. It was a look of pure, raw defiance against the fate that had been assigned to him at birth. The memory of that first meeting surfaced in the Collector's mind, a flashback to a bustling town street. A young, determined boy had called out to him, asking if he would buy any of his unneeded skills. The boy's desperation was palpable as he chased after the renowned skill collector. The Collector had turned, surprised to be addressed by a mere child. The boy pleaded with him, asking if he was just going to throw away skills he didn't need, and if so, to let him have them instead. The Collector was puzzled by the strange request, wondering why a child would be so desperate to collect skills. Using his appraisal, the Collector had looked upon the boy, only to find the shocking truth. There were no skill slots to be seen, a void where potential should have been. It was the first time he had ever encountered such a thing, a person fundamentally incapable of holding an ability. The memory shifted, recalling scenes of the boy being mercilessly bullied by his peers. They taunted him, calling him inept and telling him to stay out of town. They mocked him for being cocky, despite being being born completely skillless. But the boy refused to accept their judgment, shouting back that it wasn't impossible. He furiously denied that he was inept, claiming he just hadn't awakened his skills yet. He swore that he could get skills through hard work, and that he would prove them all wrong by secluding himself in the mountains to train. He had turned to the collector, a silent witness to his humiliation, and vowed that he would get a skill, telling him to just watch. The boy then turned and ran, heading for the desolate mountains with nothing but his own conviction. A profound sense of pity had washed over the collector as he watched the small figure disappear into the wilderness. And so began the boy's lonely trial. A life dedicated to a single seemingly impossible goal. He would swing a simple wooden stick 100 times a day, and then even more, pushing his body to its absolute limit. He clung to the desperate belief that if he just worked hard enough, he could force a skill into existence. Back in the present, the collector held a lantern, the flickering light illuminating his troubled face. He wondered if it was truly possible, if hard work alone could overcome such a fundamental deficiency. The boy's unwavering hope stood in stark contrast to the cold, hard facts of the world. The collector reflected on his own purpose, collecting discarded skills like management, appraisal, psychology, and speech through his trading. It was all in service of one day meeting his older sister. He had become a vessel for countless abilities, a repository of forgotten potential. He had handled so many skills over the years, even possessing the incredible power of eternal youth. He stared into the starry night, a profound realization dawning on him. In his long life, in his single-minded pursuit, had he forgotten the very spirit that drove people like the boy? He now understood that the spirit he may have lost over the years was something he needed to reclaim. A new resolve formed within him, a decision to act. He knew that getting involved was a hazard of his job, a potential entanglement in a hopeless cause. But he felt he had to, at the very least, meet with the boy again. He couldn't simply stand by and watch this incredible display of human will from a distance any longer. He felt a deep, resonant connection to the boy's struggle, a need to be a part of it, even if only as a witness. Making a swift and drastic decision, the collector began to strip away his own abilities. He removed every skill from his slots except for the ones that were absolutely essential for his survival and his mission. Powers like presence detection, psychology, and speech were all cast aside. He kept only management, acting, and the eternal youth that preserved his life, and set out into the cold wilderness. He found the boy deep in the mountains, calling out to him that he was the collector from the other day. He apologized for seeking him out, explaining that he was worried. The boy was immediately defensive, yelling at him to get lost if he was just there to make fun of his training. The collector, now without his speech skill, found his words coming out clumsily, unable to properly express his intentions. The boy's frustration grew, and he pointed out the cruel irony of his situation. Even if his relentless training paid off and he managed to awaken a skill, he would have no way to prove it. He didn't possess the appraisal skill needed to verify its existence. This provided the collector with the perfect opening, a way to offer help without offering pity. He told the boy that he could perform the appraisal for him, free of charge whenever he wished. It was a simple offer, a small kindness that would change both of their lives forever. And so their strange relationship began, with the collector making regular visits to the isolated cabin in the snowy mountains. The boy who had once been hostile, now greeted him with a hint of surprise, remarking that he was an oddball for actually coming back. The collector would bring supplies, like paper and tools, and watch as the boy, now a young man, continued his grueling training. He would sit with him, using his appraisal skill time and time again, always with the same result. Yet he continued to come back, providing a small measure of comfort and companionship in the lonely wilderness. The scene shifts back to the present day, 50 years after their first meeting. The man, now old and gray, is lying in bed, having fallen ill, with the eternally youthful collector tending to him. He wakes up and greets the collector cheerfully, happy to see his old friend has shown up once again. The man snaps the collector out of a reverie, noticing that he's spacing out. The collector, lost in the memories of their long history, is pulled back to the present. He looks at his friend, the passage of time so evident on his face, while he himself has remained unchanged. With a proud grin, the man changes the subject, boasting about a recent accomplishment. He excitedly recounts how he defeated an intermediate-level monster with a single swing of his sword. He asks the collector if he thinks that's amazing, seeking validation for his growing strength. The collector remains silent, a stark contrast to the man's boisterous energy. The man laughs, reminding him of the old days, 50 years ago, when it used to take him an entire night to beat a single monster of that caliber. The vast expanse of time they've known each other hangs heavy in the air. A terrible thought enters the collector's mind as he looks at his aging friend. The man is not young anymore, his body is frail and worn. What if continuing to root for this impossible miracle, this fantasy of awakening a skill, only leads his friend to a situation that kills him? He clenches his fist, a firm resolve hardening his features. He cannot let this continue any further. For his friend's own safety, for his very life, he has to be the one to stop him now. But the man is lost in his own world of hope, his arms thrown wide in celebration. He declares that he is another step closer to awakening a skill, that he will become a beacon of hope for all the unskilled in the world. His dream is bigger than himself now. It's a dream for everyone who shares his fate. The collector, faced with this pure radiant hope, finds himself unable to speak the cruel truth. He can only manage a weak agreement, a lie to preserve his friend's spirit for just a moment longer. The man's smile falters as he immediately sees through the facade, stating plainly that the collector is a terrible liar. A fierce blizzard rages across the mountain range, mirroring the turmoil in the collector's heart. The wind howls violently around the small isolated cabin. The scene is one of cold, desolate power, a force of nature that dwarfs the struggles of the men inside. Inside a tavern at the foot of the mountain, the collector sits with a warm drink, staring out at the snow-covered path. He reflects on his failure, his inability to crush his friend's spirit. Once again, he couldn't bring himself to stop him. The bartender makes small talk, asking why a customer like him is stuck in town. The collector explains that he was visiting a friend who lives up in the mountains nearby, but the blizzard has trapped him. The bartender is surprised to hear of anyone living in such a remote place. Another patron overhears and chimes in, realizing they must be talking about the strange old man who lives in the mountains. He mentions that travelers often tell stories about a muscular old man fighting monsters up in the snowy peaks. The collector's friend has become something of a local legend. The bartender's tone turns serious, and he advises the collector to stay out of the mountains for now. He warns that a particularly vicious monster has appeared recently, so dangerous that the entire country has issued a formal warning about it. The friendly atmosphere of the tavern is replaced by a sense of impending dread. The patron adds that despite the official warning, some adventurers still went up the mountain, likely seeking glory or riches. His words trail off as the tavern door is thrown open, revealing a group of terrified adventurers stumbling inside. They speak of a vicious monster, a giant white bipedal creature, perhaps a yeti. The collector wonders if his friend would be able to defeat such a foe. He has grown strong, but this sounds like a threat on an entirely different level. The bartender corrects them, his voice trembling with fear. He says that according to the rumors, the monster is 3 times the size of a yeti and can breathe a blast of pure cold air. As he speaks, the collector slams a handful of coins on the counter, his face grim with worry. Suddenly, a group of adventurers burst through the door, fleeing for their lives from the very monster they were discussing. They scream in terror, having never seen such a huge beast before. Outside, the snowstorm rages, and a colossal shadow looms over the trees. The old man stands firm against the blizzard, his sword drawn, positioning himself between the monster and the fleeing adventurers. He yells at them to get moving, his voice a commanding roar against the wind. He intends to face this threat alone. The creature is revealed in its full horror, a frost giant, its face a mask of primal fury. It unleashes a devastating torrent of ice and snow from its mouth, a freezing blizzard aimed directly at the small group of humans. The adventurers cower in absolute terror. With unwavering courage, the old man plants his feet, raising his sword to weather the icy blast. He screams at the others to stay back, vowing to deal with the monster himself. His silhouette stands defiant against the overwhelming power of the giant. The frost giant roars, its breath a weapon of pure cold, while the old man meets its gaze with a fierce, determined grin. It is a battle of raw power against indomitable will, a tiny human standing against a mythical beast. The blizzard intensifies, whipping snow across the harsh, unforgiving landscape. The wind screams through the mountains, a brutal and chaotic symphony of nature's fury. It is a terrible stage for a final, desperate battle. The collector sprints through the blinding snowstorm, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He knows that ordinary people wouldn't even consider challenging a top-class monster from the giant tribe. His friend is charging headfirst into a suicidal fight. He pushes himself harder, knowing the situation is impossible. Even a full party of skilled adventurers can't handle a creature like this. Yet his friend, who possesses no skills at all, is trying to fight it alone. It is a fool's errand, a death sentence. As he runs, he uses his remaining skills to analyze the situation, sensing 2 large signals ahead. One is the frost giant, but the other, before he can process it, he sees the man charging the beast. The old man is trying to awaken his skills through this desperate life-or-death struggle. The frost giant swings its massive arm with incredible force, swatting the old man away like an insect. The impact is brutal, sending his body flying through the air and crashing violently into the snow-covered ground. The adventurers who had been saved can only watch in horror from the tree line, completely helpless. The sheer scale of the giant is overwhelming, its leg alone like the trunk of an ancient tree. The old man's attack had been utterly futile. The collector finally arrives at the scene, his eyes wide with panic. He sprints towards the downed adventurers, yelling to see if they are all right. His immediate concern is for the innocent bystanders caught in this monstrous battle. But the old man struggles back to his feet, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. He yells at the collector not to interfere, claiming this monster is his to defeat. He is consumed by a mad conviction that victory here will grant him the skill he has sought his entire life. With every ounce of strength left in his aging body, the man lets out a primal, deafening roar. The sheer force of the sound is so powerful that the massive frost giant actually flinches, momentarily stunned by the raw auditory assault. It is the opening he needs. As the giant recoils, its mouth hanging open in shock, the man charges forward with a final desperate surge of adrenaline. He leaps into the air, his sword held high, ready to strike a decisive blow. He drives his blade with all his might directly into the frost giant's gaping maw. The steel pierces flesh and bone, a final all-or-nothing attack aimed at the creature's very brain. It is an act of unbelievable bravery and sheer recklessness. The sword finds its mark, plunging deep into the monster's head. The force of the blow is immense, the blade tearing through the giant's skull with a sickening finality. The blade erupts from the back of the frost giant's cranium in a horrific explosion of black blood. The monster is slain, its life extinguished in a single, perfectly placed strike. However, the kinetic feedback from the blow and the giant's death throes send a shockwave back through the sword. The old man is thrown backward, his body racked with pain from the violent recoil. His body crashes into the snow, the impact sending a spray of dark blood across the pristine white landscape. The battle is over, but the cost has been immense. The adventurers stare in disbelief at the scene. The frost giant lies motionless, a fatal wound dealt by the old man's sword. They can't comprehend what they've just witnessed, a man without any skills defeating a monster that an entire party of them could not. The collector rushes to his friend's side, finding him slumped against a leafless tree, his life fading fast. He pants for breath, leaning over the dying man, the snow around them stained crimson. The man looks up at the collector, his voice a weak whisper, and asks for one last favor. He begs the collector to use appraisal to check his skills, to see if his final desperate act was enough. The collector, his heart breaking, tells him not to speak, that his wounds are too severe, but the man insists. He weakly grabs the collector's hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and asks again what the result is. The collector's eyes fill with tears as he looks down at his dying friend, the man who chased an impossible dream for 50 years. Fighting back a sob, the collector gives his friend the only gift he has left to give, a beautiful lie. He congratulates him, his voice thick with emotion, and tells him that he has finally awakened a skill. He tells him that his new skill is roar. A faint, rattling laugh escapes the old man's lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He closes his eyes for the last time, dying with a smile on his face, believing that in the end he had won. The collector can no longer hold back his grief. Tears stream down his face as he clutches his friend's hand, his body shaking with silent sobs. He mourns the loss of a truly remarkable man. He whispers to the still body, his voice choked with sorrow. He calls his friend a terrible liar, just as the man had called him, a final heartbreaking acknowledgement of the lies they told each other to keep a beautiful dream alive. The collector carries the man's body through the snow, away from the scene of the battle, as the adventurers watch in stunned silence. A flock of birds takes flight from a nearby cave, startled by the lingering scent of death. He carries his friend on his back, the man's blood staining his own clothes. His expression is one of profound sadness and exhaustion as he makes the final journey back to the place his friend called home. He arrives back at the small lonely log cabin, a silent monument to a life of tireless effort and unwavering hope. The snow falls gently, covering the world in a blanket of white. As he prepares a grave, he finds something leaning against the cabin wall. It is a crude wooden post, and a shovel stands nearby, as if the man had been preparing for his own end. He examines the post and sees words carved into the wood, a name the man had chosen for himself. It reads, "Inept man." The collector is stunned, realizing his friend had carved his own grave marker, defining himself by the one thing he could never overcome. But the collector shakes his head, refusing to accept this final self-assessment. He holds a knife, his knuckles white, and declares that his friend wasn't inept at all. He had watched him live his entire life with more courage and determination than anyone he had ever known. Memories flash through his mind. The man as a defiant boy, as a tireless warrior, as a hopeful elder. He was not defined by his lack of skills. He was so much more than that. The collector realizes the truth of his friend's existence. He was a wonderful person, a man who refused to lose to the fate he was given, who fought against his own limitations until his very last breath. With purpose, the collector takes his knife to the grave marker. Above the words, "Inept man," he carefully carves a new title, a true epitaph for his friend. He carves the word "outstanding." He places the finished marker in the snowy ground and collapses before it, his head resting against his pack. He has done all he can for the man who was his friend for half a century. As he finally leaves the lonely grave, he looks back one last time. He promises to return to bring some more flowers once spring comes. He then departs the mountain, leaving the outstanding inept man to rest in peace. Sometime later, after the snow has melted and flowers bloom, the cabin stands silent in the mountains. A woman's boots step into frame, near a bouquet of fresh flowers left at the base of the grave. A young woman with blonde hair tied in twin tails examines the strange grave marker. She reads the inscription aloud, "Outstanding inept man," and bursts into laughter, remarking on what an utterly odd thing for someone to write. She turns to her companion, a woman with longer, lighter blonde hair, and asks for her opinion. She calls her elder sister, seeking her agreement on the absurdity of the grave. The elder sister looks at the grave with a gentle, almost serene smile. She quietly agrees with her younger sister's assessment. Her smile then twists into something cold and cruel, her eyes filled with disdain. She states with chilling finality that people who are born without talent are nothing more than trash. He sat alone, contemplating the nature of his work in a world where skills defined a person's life and worth. As the collector, his trade was in these very skills, a profession that had shown him the best and worst of humanity. The weight of his recent experiences pressed down on him, his brow furrowed in deep, troubled thought. A grim realization settled in his mind. This path was unsustainable, and something needed to change. The faces of men he had dealt with, their expressions twisted in desperation and pain, flashed through his memory, a stark reminder of the darker side of his collections. Just then, a cheerful voice broke through his somber reflections as the owner of the diner approached his table. She greeted him warmly, expressing her delight that the collector was visiting her establishment so soon after its opening, and placed a steaming plate of food before him. He glanced around the bustling room, filled with happy patrons and the clatter of silverware. The owner beamed with pride, telling him that she was eternally grateful, as the diner's very existence was only possible because of his help. She lamented that she couldn't offer him more extravagant hospitality, a wave of stacked, dirty plates in the background showing just how busy they were. He simply told her not to worry about him, appreciating the simple gesture of the meal. The owner mentioned that they had been struggling with being short on staff, but their luck had turned recently. She explained that they had just hired an incredibly earnest and hardworking young new employee to help out. A bright, energetic girl with wide, sparkling eyes appeared at her call, her status revealing she possessed the rare skill of good luck LV. She hurried over with a tray laden with freshly steamed buns, her movements eager but slightly uncoordinated in her new uniform. As she approached his table, her eyes widened in shock and recognition, the name collector escaping her lips in a whisper. He too was taken aback, recognizing the girl before him. The pieces clicked into place as he realized this was the very same flower-selling girl to whom he had given the diner's flyer. Her transformation was so complete that he had almost failed to recognize her in the waitress uniform, her entire demeanor brighter and more confident. She thanked him profusely for helping her find this job, offering him some of the steamed buns she was carrying as a token of her gratitude. He politely declined the buns, explaining that he was simply there for a proper meal, and she quickly recommended the Salisbury steak from the lunch menu, pointing to the other happy customers enjoying their food. He told her that he would have to try it on his next visit, as he had just returned from a long and draining trip and simply wanted to rest. Understanding completely, she told him to take his time and relax. As she returned to her duties, she couldn't help but steal a glance back at him, sitting alone at his table, a solitary figure lost in thought. His mind wandered to the grim realities of his work, reflecting on how life continues its relentless march forward even in the face of death. Deciding he had collected enough skills for the day, he considered buying some flowers, but then noticed that the flower girl's usual street-side stall was conspicuously absent. Later, as he walked through the town, he happened upon her again, this time carrying a basket brimming with fresh blossoms. He asked if she was still selling flowers in the evenings, and she explained with a smile that she raises them in a garden at home to earn a little extra money for her family. A wave of relief washed over him as he told her this was perfect timing. He had been looking to buy some flowers for a friend. Seeing the somber look on his face, she hesitated for a moment before quietly asking if he had eaten dinner yet. He seemed surprised by the personal question, admitting that he had not. A deep blush spread across her cheeks as she nervously but sincerely invited him to have dinner at her home. She proudly explained that her mother possessed a cultivation skill, which allowed her to grow incredibly delicious vegetables in their garden. She confessed that she had noticed he seemed very down earlier that afternoon, and she hoped that sharing a good home-cooked meal with her family might help to cheer him up. He was struck by her sharp perception and genuine kindness, realizing she was far more observant than he had initially thought. She quickly added that this was also her way of repaying him for helping her get the job at the diner, even if her home was small and shabby. Overcome by her sincerity, he gratefully accepted her offer. As dusk settled over the town, they walked along a quiet dirt road, leading away from the main streets, the first stars of the evening beginning to dot the darkening sky. During their walk, she complimented him on being such a skilled conversationalist, making the journey feel effortless and pleasant. Unseen by her, his high-level skills in speech and acting were a testament to the fact that his easygoing charm was a carefully crafted tool of his trade. Soon they arrived at a small weathered wooden house with a few boards patching up the windows. Despite its humble appearance, she announced their arrival with a bright, proud smile, declaring this was her home. Beside the house was a small but thriving garden, the neat rows of vegetables, a clear sign of her mother's diligent care and powerful skill. As they stepped through the doorway, his night vision skill allowed him to see every detail of the well-tended garden with perfect clarity. Violet called out that she was home, announcing that she had brought the collector to join them for dinner, and a warm feminine voice welcomed her from within. Inside, they were greeted by her mother and two small children, a boy and a girl, who stared up at him with wide, curious eyes. The mother apologized for the simple reception, saying she would have prepared something more special if she had known her daughter was bringing home the big guy she'd been talking about. Violet quickly introduced her family, and the collector bowed politely, introducing himself in turn. Her mother insisted he make himself comfortable while she prepared some food. Violet immediately offered to help in the kitchen, explaining to her younger siblings that she had invited the collector because she wanted to cheer him up. The two children, their curiosity piqued, gathered around him and asked what exactly a collector does. He smiled warmly, confirming that their big sister had told them a little about him and his introduction to her new job. He explained his profession in the simplest terms. He travels the world, trading and collecting skills that people no longer need. The revelation caused the children's jaws to drop in awe, and even their mother paused in the background, listening with surprise. The children's eyes lit up with a sudden desperate hope, and they eagerly asked if he would be willing to buy their skills. They explained that their family was very poor, and since the free group appraisal service hadn't come to their town in years, they didn't even know what skills they possessed. Seeing the earnest plea in their eyes, he offered to use his own appraisal skill to check their abilities for them, completely free of charge. The mother looked worried, expressing her hesitation about what he might find, but the children were already begging him to proceed, their excitement overriding any fear. He paused, considering the potential consequences of the appraisal. He knew that discovering a negative or useless skill could be a devastating blow to a child's spirit, and he braced himself for that possibility. The appraisal revealed the boy possessed grit and fleet-footed, while the girl had calculation and presence detection. He turned to their anxious mother with a reassuring smile, telling her that both of her children had truly outstanding skills, and that she had nothing to worry about. As the mother whispered to her daughter in relieved disbelief, the collector's thoughts turned to Violet. He remembered her own skill, good luck, and recalled the day he met her, when he bought every single flower she had for sale. It was an act of kindness that had set her on this new path, a small push from fate. He knew her life hadn't been easy, and that she wasn't blessed with powerful skills like her siblings, but he also noted that her chronic asthma seemed to have improved lately. He had paid her more than double what the flowers were worth that day, a small investment in her future that was already paying off. Soon, a simple but wonderfully fragrant meal was set upon the small wooden table. A large pot of stew sat in the center, surrounded by bowls of salad and fresh vegetables. The family erupted in a chorus of cheerful thanks, their happy voices filling the small home as they eagerly began to eat. He took his first bite, and the flavor immediately took him by surprise. It was not a complex or refined taste, but one that was deeply simple, comfortable, and profoundly satisfying. As he looked at the happy family eating and laughing together, he understood the source of the incredible flavor. This was a meal packed with something no amount of money could buy: love. A flood of memories washed over him, a stark and painful contrast to the warmth of this table. He recalled cold, lonely meals in opulent halls and the chilling memory of a blonde woman, a past that felt a million miles away from this humble home. Violet noticed his momentary pause, her brow crinkling with concern as she asked if something was wrong or if he disliked the food. He quickly snapped out of his reverie, assuring her that the meal was absolutely delicious. After the joyful dinner, the mother noticed her children were getting sleepy from all the excitement. She asked the collector if he would be willing to tell them some stories from his travels as a bedtime tale, and he graciously agreed. The soft moonlight streamed through the window of the children's bedroom, casting long shadows across the floor. He had just finished a fantastical tale about a forest and a dragon when the two children, tucked snugly into their shared bed, asked if they could ask him a favor before he left. With eyes full of innocent hope, they pleaded with him to buy their skills. They explained that their family was poor, and they believed that selling their skills was the only way they could help make life easier for their mother and sister. A wave of emotion washed over him as he looked at their small, earnest faces. He was deeply moved by their selflessness and how much they cherished their family. Feeling a strange and powerful sense of jealousy, he reached out and gently placed a hand on each of their heads, his voice soft as he explained his purpose. He told them that he only collects skills that are unneeded or cause harm, and that the wonderful skills they possess would grow stronger with them and become vital for their futures. He made them a solemn promise: if a time ever came when they were in true desperate need of money, they could come and find him. As he stepped out of the bedroom, Violet's mother was waiting for him, thanking him not only for tucking in the children, but for the kindness he had shown Violet. He smiled, dismissing her thanks with a gentle wave of his hand. Her expression then turned serious, and she made a shocking request of her own. She asked if he would be willing to purchase her skills. She confessed that while she was overjoyed to see Violet so much happier lately, she felt like a constant burden on her children. He stared at her, stunned into silence. She was asking for the exact same thing as her children, willing to sacrifice her own abilities for a bit of savings to ease their family struggles. Looking into her determined eyes, he told her that his profession had shown him countless families, but he had never seen a home as happy as hers. He admitted that its warmth was so pure and bright that it almost dazzled him. He explained that he only accepts requests from people who are genuinely troubled by their skills, because the very presence of a skill can alter a person's life. He clarified that he doesn't buy skills to provide a simple one-time payment. His goal was not to hand out money, because he knew that true happiness could never be bought. The mother listened, her expression softening with understanding. He then confessed something deeply personal, admitting that he was in fact quite jealous of the happiness her family shared. Just then, Violet, who had been listening from the doorway, rushed in and began scolding her mother for being so forward with their guest. Blushing with embarrassment, Violet insisted her mother was saying strange things and would bother the collector, warning that she can be very pushy when she gets an idea in her head. A genuine, unforced smile spread across the collector's face as he watched the light-hearted family bickering. He thought to himself that being here, witnessing this simple, loving family, had managed to cheer him up more than he could have imagined. The jealousy he felt was real, a deep longing for something he had never known. As he finally departed from the small warm house and walked back into the cool night, he reflected on the evening. The warmth had felt good, but there was an uncomfortable, unfamiliar ache that came with it. Violet followed him outside, apologizing once more for her mother's behavior and sincerely telling him that he was welcome to visit them anytime he wished. She looked at him with earnest eyes, promising that if he ever felt down again, he could rely on them, and she would do whatever she could to be useful to him. He looked away, his gaze drifting towards the starry sky as he considered her offer. A warm home, he thought, was a light far too dazzling for someone like him. He thanked her quietly, the words filled with a profound and unspoken gratitude. As he walked away into the darkness, he watched as moths fluttered around a distant lantern. He felt a kinship with the creatures, seeing himself as a moth drawn irresistibly to a light in the dark. It was a light he had only just discovered, and as he continued on his solitary path, he was left to wonder if it was truly all right for him to be so charmed by it, to long for it so deeply. With a cunning smile, she considered her options, her mind racing with a private strategy. She reasoned that her elder sister would never overlook something as significant as the events unfolding here. Therefore, by staying close to Ripley, she could create a disturbance large enough to draw her sister's attention and force a reunion. The young man, meanwhile, was completely overcome with a trembling that racked his entire body. The mere thought of meeting his elder sister filled him with a potent mixture of dread and desperate longing. He crouched low to the ground, his knuckles white as he tried to steady himself against the overwhelming emotion. Suddenly, Ripley's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a dawning horror she knew all too well. The ground began to shake violently beneath their feet, a deep and ominous rumble that signaled the beginning of another cycle of despair. She gritted her teeth, recognizing the telltale signs of the catastrophe that was starting all over again. Her companion struggled to remain upright, stumbling as the tremors grew more intense and the earth pitched beneath him. He looked over at her, his face pale with confusion and fear, asking if this violent earthquake was the very thing she had been warning him about. The chaos was escalating far faster than he could have ever imagined. Ripley's expression was one of pure anguish as the horrifying reality crashed down upon her. The entrance to the cave had collapsed once more, unleashing the swarm of monsters that had been sealed within. She was consumed by the terror of her impending death and the grim fate of the villagers, questioning how the two of them could possibly stand against such an overwhelming force. He was paralyzed by the crushing weight of his memories, the echoes of his past failures screaming in his mind. This would be the fourth time he had died, a loop of suffering that always ended with Ripley's spirit being sacrificed for his quest. The realization struck him with sickening force. To continue searching for his sister while the world was forced to loop due to Ripley's skill felt like an act of profound cruelty. But Ripley, refusing to succumb to despair, turned to face him with a look of fierce determination. She declared that her skills were her merchandise, and she was prepared to offer him a cut-rate sale. With a fire in her eyes, she proposed that they fight together, that they combine their strengths to finally defeat the monsters and break the cycle. Before them, the source of their terror was revealed, a massive, dark seal carved into the rock face of the cave. The intricate arcane symbol pulsed with a malevolent energy before shattering completely, the barrier that held back the darkness now utterly broken. The air grew cold as the last remnants of the magical ward dissipated into nothing. From the gaping maw of the cave, a grotesque legion of creatures began to pour forth into the world. Slimy, amorphous blobs slithered alongside winged beasts with single, unblinking eyes, while horned demons with gaping mouths snarled at the new light. It was a chaotic and terrifying horde, an army of nightmare fuel made manifest. The monstrous tide surged forward, a wave of claws and fangs spreading rapidly across the landscape. They moved with an unnatural speed, a blur of motion that promised to overwhelm the tranquil countryside in a matter of moments. The sheer number of them was enough to sap the hope from even the most stalwart heart. Turning to her companion, Ripley made her offer concrete, apologizing that this was all she had available for him at the moment. She extended her hand, proposing to sell him some of her offensive skills. She assured him that for this critical time it would have to be enough to give them a fighting chance. As their hands clasped, the deal was sealed, and a shimmering cascade of light erupted between them. Glowing panels materialized in the air, listing the incredible abilities being transferred: advanced swordsmanship, perception, physical ability, and tenacity, all alongside his own return by death. The protagonist stared in wide-eyed disbelief at the sudden and immense power he now possessed. A surge of newfound confidence coursed through him, and he clenched his fist with a feeling of true power for the first time. He declared with unwavering conviction that he could now face the swarm, that he could finally overturn his cruel fate and save his village from annihilation. He then turned to Ripley, asking if she could provide him with a weapon to wield these new skills. Ripley stared back at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and exasperation. She scoffed at his sudden bravado, bluntly asking if the thought of simply running away to avoid death had ever crossed his mind. She immediately dismissed the idea as utterly stupid, a coward solution to a problem that demanded a warrior's resolve. She watched him, her mind quietly assessing his unwavering determination to save his home. While she understood his noble intentions, a part of her worried that his high-minded ideals would eventually be his undoing, biting back at him when he least expected it. She then stated with cold finality that she would never run away from her only skill, her identity and curse wrapped up in this endless battle. Fueled by his new abilities, the young man pointed resolutely toward the looming threat. He proclaimed that if fate could truly be rewound, then he would use that power to protect his village from the monstrous swarm. He grimly noted that the cave ahead was teeming with low and intermediate class monsters, and he had even spotted a high-class one among them. As they drew closer, the horrifying truth of his words became apparent. The cave entrance was heavily guarded by a vanguard of grotesque creatures. Bat-like monsters with bulbous eyes and slimy abominations stood ready, their collective gaze fixed on the two approaching figures, promising a swift and brutal confrontation. He paused, recalling the mechanics of their shared curse, a mental diagram clarifying the rules of this twisted game. He understood that if Ripley were to die this time, the world's clock would rewind a full 24 hours. Crucially, however, the skills and knowledge they had gained would be carried over, giving them a significant advantage in the next loop. Ripley charged into the fray, her sword a blur of silver as she engaged the first wave of enemies. A grim thought entered her mind as she fought. If she were to fall here, she would forget the very skills she had just sold to him, rendering her sacrifice in this timeline utterly meaningless. The stakes were impossibly high, not just for the world, but for her own progression. She moved with a speed that defied belief, weaving through the battlefield like a phantom. Her expression was a mask of intense focus, fully aware that a single mistake could lead to a catastrophic reset. The situation was more serious than any of the previous loops. Unleashing the full might of her enhanced abilities, she became a whirlwind of destruction, her blade dancing through the monster ranks. The combination of advanced swordsmanship and perception was incredible, making it seem as though her enemies were moving in slow motion. She confidently shouted for her partner to leave these creatures to her. Not to be outdone, the protagonist stepped forward, his right hand erupting in a vortex of roaring flame. He announced their battle strategy, explaining that he would use his stocked fire magic to incinerate the weaker low-class monsters. This would leave Ripley free to focus her efforts on the more dangerous intermediate-class threats. Ripley found herself immediately swarmed, a circle of snarling beasts closing in from all sides. A hulking creature with razor-sharp teeth growled menacingly to her left, while a multi-limbed horror stared her down from the right. She stood her ground, her sword held at the ready, prepared for the onslaught. With breathtaking agility, she spun on her heel, her blade carving a clean arc through the air to intercept a monster lunging for her back. Her movements were precise and deadly, a testament to the skills now flowing through her veins. She was no longer just a victim of fate, she was a warrior shaping her own destiny. A massive horned beast swung its powerful claws in a devastating downward slash, intent on tearing her apart. Ripley ducked low, the lethal appendages whistling harmlessly over her head as she narrowly dodged the attack. A thin cut appeared on her cheek, a stark reminder of how close she was to death's door. Watching the battle unfold, the protagonist wore a fierce, determined smile, completely unfazed by the fresh wounds on his own face. He mused that a wound like this was nothing, not even a minor scrape when compared to the finality of dying. His experience with the return by death skill had forged his fear into an unbreakable resolve. He thrust his hand forward, unleashing a torrent of black-tinged fire that consumed the last of the low-class slimes, turning them to ash in an instant. With his area cleared, he called out to Ripley, asking if she was alright as he announced he was finished and was on his way to join her fight. Ripley, bleeding but exhilarated, let out a triumphant cry. She shouted that with the skills she had received from the collector, she felt invincible, capable of taking on any enemy that dared to stand in her way. For the first time, a genuine smile of hope graced her lips as she declared that she could finally, at long last, change her fate. But in that fleeting moment of triumph, a shadow fell over her, vast and absolute. From the very rocks of the cliffside, a colossal stone golem emerged, its form towering and monstrous. Before Ripley could even react, its enormous jagged maw opened wide and slammed shut, swallowing her whole in a single earth-shattering crunch. The world seemed to slow down, the sound of battle fading into a dull roar in the protagonist's ears. All he could do was scream her name in pure, unadulterated horror, his voice lost in the sudden brutal silence left in her wake. His gaze remained fixed on the unfolding chaos, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with grim certainty. He deduced that the high-level monster emerging from the cave, with its powerful earth armor, must have been the very cause of Ripley's death in the timeline that was now erased. Ripley, however, was no longer a victim of fate, brandishing his blade with fierce resolve. He declared his unwavering intention to defeat the beast, revealing that he had prepared his stock skills, ready to intervene and provide aid at a moment's notice. He launched himself into the fray, a blur of white and black against the monstrous stone figures. His sword, a flash of silver, descended with incredible force, aimed directly at the creature's formidable, rocky hide. With a voice raw with emotion and determination, he roared out his defiance not just to the monster, but to the cruel destiny that had bound him. He vowed that he would single-handedly change his own fate, and in doing so, secure the future of the entire village. The impact was tremendous as his blade met the creature's tough exterior, sending jagged shards of rock and dark energy flying in all directions. The sound of the shattering golem echoed across the battlefield, a testament to his newfound power and unbreakable will. Turning his head slightly, he looked back at the collector with an intense, knowing gaze. He urged him to bear witness to the true potential of his supposed only skill, a power that could rewrite reality itself. A faint, triumphant smile touched Ripley's lips as the last of the immediate threat crumbled to dust. In that quiet moment of victory, a profound realization washed over him. He knew, with absolute certainty, that fate had finally been changed. The sun cast long shadows over the quiet, rolling hills, the path ahead now clear of any danger. A sense of tranquility had settled over the landscape, a stark contrast to the life-or-death struggle that had just taken place. Back in the village, life carried on with a peaceful mundanity that felt almost surreal. Villagers went about their daily routines, completely unaware of the catastrophe that had been so narrowly averted. Walking beside her two saviors, Leah's bright smile was infectious as she remarked how strange it felt. She commented that after so long, the world had finally begun to move forward normally again, a simple truth that held immense weight for her. She turned to the collector, her eyes filled with profound gratitude for his intervention. Leah expressed how incredibly glad she was that he had helped them, and that because of him, she and everyone else had been saved from a terrible end. The immense strain of the repeated loops suddenly caught up with Ripley, his body sagging as he leaned against the collector for support. He confessed the horrifying truth of his power, admitting that to achieve this victory, he had been forced to die over and over, at least 4 times, a cycle of agony that had nearly broken him. With a desperate urgency in his voice, Ripley pleaded with the collector to purchase his skill. He acknowledged that management was a troublesome ability, but he begged him to take return by death, knowing the collector could store it outside his regular slots and didn't care for monetary payment. He shakily held out his hands, making a formal and desperate offer to sell his only skill. The collector stared, his expression unreadable as he weighed the sheer gravity of this cursed power being offered to him. Without a moment's hesitation, the collector made his decision, one that would change both of their lives forever. He agreed to the deal, stating that he would indeed buy the only skill, return by death, but he would do so for free, sealing their pact. However, as they sat to perform the transfer, a devastating obstacle became apparent. The collector explained that he had tried this before, but his trading skill, still at a mere level 1, was simply too weak to acquire an only skill, leaving Ripley looking on in utter shock and despair. The last vestiges of Ripley's composure shattered, his voice trembling as he revealed the true horror of his curse. He confessed that as long as he possessed this skill, he was doomed to live a life where he was fundamentally unable to die, an eternity of consciousness he could not escape. His mind plunged into a terrifying spiral, envisioning futures of endless torment. He questioned what would happen if he died of a slow, agonizing illness, and whether he would be forced to kill himself daily just to rewind time, a lonely loop that might one day consume the entire world. Snapping back to the present, he immediately apologized for his outburst, insisting that his terrible fate was not the collector's fault. He tried to retract his words, but the weight of his confession hung heavy in the air between them. The collector, however, refused to let him bear the burden alone. He offered his own apology, stating with conviction that this failure was his and his alone, a direct result of his trading skill being too weak to help. A fundamental and cruel rule of their world hung over this failed transaction. It was an accepted truth that only skills were unique in their stagnation. There were no tales of them ever leveling up, forever locked at level 1. The collector found himself unable to truly grasp the sheer magnitude of Ripley's constant fear and anxiety. He understood that if the world continued to loop for Ripley, the agony of death would be a constant companion, and eventually someone far less kind was bound to notice his power. His thoughts grew grim as he considered the horrifying possibilities if Ripley's secret were to be discovered by the wrong person. A captor could exploit him endlessly, killing him again and again to reverse any unfavorable outcome, a fate of perpetual torture. The collector felt a wave of self-loathing wash over him, questioning his entire purpose and feeling pathetic for his inability to prevent such a future. But from that despair, a new radical idea began to form in his mind. He reasoned that if only skills possessed the concept of levels at all, then it must be possible for them to reach level 2. This became his new purpose, a mission that aligned with the very reason he became the collector in the first place. To hone his skill until he could meet a certain someone. He looked Ripley dead in the eye, making a solemn vow that resonated with unshakable conviction. He admitted that he was powerless to help right now, but he promised to raise his trading to level 2, and then he would finally purchase Return by Death. The memory of a dear friend, one who had fought relentlessly until the very bitter end, flashed through his mind. He knew that if he were to give up now, when a sliver of hope still remained, that friend's memory would be dishonored. Ripley was stunned by this declaration, the idea of his skill leveling up being something he had never even considered. Though he admitted to knowing little about the mechanics of his own power, he clenched his fist, a new resolve hardening his features, knowing he couldn't afford to simply wallow in self-pity. As they prepared to part ways, Ripley offered a promise of his own, telling the collector to call on him if his own skill ever became too much to bear, a pledge to lend his strength in return. The collector was left standing on the path, still processing the shocking existence of a power like Return by Death. He turned and began to walk away, his boots kicking up dust from the dirt road. He mused that only skills were full of surprises, but because of this strange encounter, time was finally truly moving forward again. His gaze hardened, a new fire lit within him that sharpened his purpose. The days of simply wandering as the skill collector in search of his sister were now over, replaced by a much more urgent and difficult quest. For he understood a simple, undeniable truth: if time itself was not allowed to move forward, then there could be no future, and no hope of ever being reunited with her at all. The town square is alive with the chatter of merchants and the footsteps of busy citizens, a familiar rhythm to the young man who navigates its streets. He is a collector, a merchant of a unique and powerful commodity in this world: skills. His trade is the buying and selling of the very abilities that define a person's life and profession. A passing acquaintance calls out to him, a hint of surprise in his voice as he notes the collector's absence from his usual work. The collector offers a simple, knowing smile, confirming he is indeed taking the day for a private matter. He clutches a sealed letter in his hand, the paper crisp and official, explaining that a regular client has specifically requested his presence. He ascends a set of well-maintained stone steps, the architecture around him growing more opulent, signaling his entry into a wealthier district of the city. His destination is a grand estate, its doors thick and imposing. As he announces his arrival, his eyes drift to a worn poster tacked to the wall, advertising an arena match, a clear hint about the powerful individual he is here to see. Before he can be formally received, a thunderous crash erupts from within, the sound of immense power being unleashed. A man with a physique carved from stone and hair like a blazing fire is seen mid-strike, his training so intense it shakes the very foundations of the building. The man, EXILED the arena champion, turns and greets the collector with a warm, familiar smile, his training momentarily forgotten. Beside him stands another muscular man, who watches the collector's arrival with a mixture of awe and nervousness. EXILED explains that the monster attraction skill he purchased from the collector has been incredibly helpful for his training, allowing him to hone his skills constantly. He then gestures to his friend Kongis, proudly stating that he had the collector help him out as well. As EXILED casually inquires about the person accompanying Kongis, the friend's composure begins to crumble under the weight of his purpose for being there. All eyes turn to the collector, the true reason for this unusual meeting. In a sudden burst of desperation, Kongis lunges forward and grabs the collector's hands, his grip surprisingly strong. He pleads, his voice cracking with emotion, begging the collector to sell him the cooking skill for his new wife, and promising that no price is too high. The collector is visibly startled by this public and frantic display, gently reminding the champion of their mutual agreement to conduct all skill transactions with the utmost discretion. He calmly asks what could possibly be happening to warrant such a desperate open plea. EXILED simply laughs it off, assuring the collector that it's fine since Kongis is his dearest friend and not just anyone. He suggests they find a more comfortable spot to sit down so they can hear the full story behind this strange request. They relocate to a well-furnished sitting area inside the grand home, a tray of drinks arriving to soothe the tense atmosphere. The three men settle in, the air thick with unspoken anxiety and curiosity. Kongis takes a slow, deliberate sip from his cup, his brow furrowed with deep trouble. Seeing his friend's distress, the collector gently prods him, asking him to explain what he means and why he's so desperate. A faint blush colors Kongus's cheeks as he begins his tale, explaining that he recently married a wonderful and lovely woman. As he provides for them as a fighter and adventurer, she has devoted herself to being a housewife, doing her absolute best in her new role. The collector logically points out that cooking is a skill that can be learned through simple practice, and that purchasing the skill outright would be a far more expensive solution. Kongus's face contorts in anguish as he cries out that she is simply beyond help, that her cooking is so bad he feels he has no other choice but to give her the skill. He describes her culinary attempts with horror, explaining that she never measures any ingredients and her sense of taste is completely broken. Her solution for overly salty food is to add more sugar, creating a concoction that is beyond any normal level of bad. Overwhelmed with emotion, Kongus laments that the food is agonizingly awful, yet his wife insists on making everything from scratch because she pours all her love into it. When the collector asks the obvious question, if he has told her how he feels, the fighter's resolve shatters. An image of his wife's adorable smiling face flashes in his mind, and he declares that he could never bring himself to say anything so cruel to her. He feels trapped, certain that at this rate, nothing will ever change and he is doomed to a lifetime of her terrible cooking. Leondold listens with a sympathetic but amused expression, remarking that he can understand the sentiment but is shocked to see a man as brave as Kongus utterly defeated by a single meal. The collector however suspected this might be the case, revealing that he anticipated words wouldn't suffice, and asked Kongus to bring a sample of the food with him today. A simple, neatly wrapped lunchbox is placed on the table between them, its unassuming appearance belying the terror that it holds. It sits there silently, a Pandora's box of culinary disaster. As the collector reaches for the lid, a jolt of pure dread runs through him as his intuition skill, now at level 30, screams a dire warning to run away. He admits to the others that he is genuinely scared, reasoning that any food that could terrify the mighty arena champion must be something truly monstrous. Just as his fingers touch the box, Kongus yells for him to wait, warning him to air it out first. A split second later, a palpable wave of wrongness emanates from the container, and the collector's defensive skills, poison resistance, the lid is lifted, revealing a scene of Lovecraftian horror. Writhing octopus tentacles, bizarrely spotted mushrooms, and slimy pulsating black orbs are arranged in a grotesque mockery of a bento box. The group recoils, their faces pale with shock and disgust. Kongus explains with a grimace that his wife lovingly calls this creation overflowing bliss of paradise, though he privately thinks of it as the overflowing horror of hell. Leondold, looking nauseous, asks the question on everyone's mind. Did his wife actually consume this herself? Kongus confirms with a defeated nod that she eats it without any issue, a fact that only makes the entire situation more terrifying and bizarre. Hoping against hope, the collector wonders aloud if perhaps the dish only looks awful but might taste acceptable. Leondold, ever the brave champion, steels himself and takes up a fork, determined to taste the abomination for himself. He carefully lifts a piece to his lips and takes a small hesitant bite. His face immediately twists in a grimace of pure revulsion, and he manages to choke out that the only thing he can say for sure is that eating it probably won't result in immediate death. This grim assessment is confirmed when Kongus reveals that he himself possesses a high level of poison resistance, which is the only reason he's managed to get used to the taste over time. The food isn't just bad, it's genuinely hazardous to consume. The collector's mind begins to race, connecting the dots. This level of culinary failure is unnatural, going far beyond the abilities of a mere amateur. He asks Kongus if he ever thought to check his wife's skill certificate, postulating that a powerful negative skill must be the cause. Kongus sighs, admitting he had the same thought. He recalls asking his wife to show him her skill certificate, the one she would have received at age 10, but for some reason she flatly refused. He adds that even when he offered to use his own appraisal skill to check for her, she continued to refuse him. Her strange and persistent secrecy only deepened the mystery and his concern. A clever idea sparks in Leondold's eyes, and he proposes a plan. They will host a home party and invite Kongus's wife, creating a natural opportunity for the collector to get close enough to use his own powerful appraisal skills without her noticing. The collector thoughtfully strokes his chin, agreeing to the plan. He then adds a suggestion of his own. He knows someone who is an expert in cooking and will invite her along as well, believing her expertise will be invaluable. The day of the party arrives, the sky bright and clear. It's a perfect day for a friendly gathering, one that masterfully conceals its true clandestine purpose. The collector makes his way across the rooftops of the city, a swift and silent approach to the champion's large and impressive estate. He is accompanied by Sumire, the talented cook from the local diner. She smooths her hair, looking around nervously and admitting that this is her very first time attending a home party. He offers her a reassuring smile, apologizing for inviting her on such short notice. He explains that her cooking is so exceptional that he knew she was the only one he could rely on for help with this delicate situation. From a high balcony, Leondold spots them arriving, raising a glass in a cheerful welcome. He calls down that they've been waiting for them, his voice booming with hospitality. Inside, the party is already in full swing, filled with guests and lively music. Just as Leondold is telling them to enjoy themselves, the late arrival announces himself, his voice filled with apologies. Kongus enters with a beautiful woman on his arm, who gently scolds him for taking so long to pick out a gift. Her voice is as lovely as her appearance, with long flowing brown hair and a kind, gentle face. She steps forward, holding a beautiful bouquet of lilies, and introduces herself to the group with poise and grace. Her presence seems to light up the entire room, leaving everyone momentarily speechless. She formally presents herself as Fairy, Congis's wife, and offers a polite bow, thanking everyone for always taking such good care of her husband. The collector is stunned into silence, his mind reeling. He cannot reconcile the image of this elegant, beautiful woman with the creator of the hellish lunchbox. He thinks to himself that she is far too good for Congis, only for Leondole to whisper that, unbelievably, she was the one who pursued him. His resolve hardening, the collector focuses his gaze, activating his powerful appraisal skill. It's time to uncover the truth behind her disastrous cooking once and for all. The results of the appraisal flash in his vision, revealing her skills, creativity at level 18, and tastelessness at a staggering level 25. Her serene smile is a perfect mask for the chaotic abilities lurking beneath. Suddenly it all makes sense. The disastrous combination of a high-level creativity skill with an even higher level of tastelessness was a recipe for culinary catastrophe. Her good intentions were being twisted into monstrous creations. But his appraisal reveals something else, a third skill that gives him pause. He looks from the floating text to her smiling face, a profound question hanging in the air. What is this secret she's hiding? He immediately recognizes that this discovery is far too sensitive to be discussed in the middle of a crowded party. He needs to find a way to speak with her alone, away from prying ears. As if on cue, Fairy approaches him, mentioning that Congis has told her all about him. She politely asks if she could speak with him outside about her skills when he has a moment. At that exact moment, a wine glass tumbles from a nearby table, shattering on the pristine floor with a loud crash. The sudden noise startles the party guests, providing a brief but tense distraction. The collector follows Fairy out of the lively party room and onto the quiet, lamplit street outside. From the doorway, Congis watches them leave, his expression a mixture of hope and deep concern. Once they are alone, the collector gets straight to the point, explaining that his profession grants him the appraisal skill and that he knows about her abilities. Fairy turns away from him, her shoulders slumping as she opens a nearby door. Without warning, she collapses to her knees on the stone steps, her head bowed low. She begs him, her voice trembling with desperation, not to reveal what he has discovered to her husband. The collector is taken aback, not by her plea about the cooking skills, but by the sheer terror in her voice. He asks why she is so adamant about hiding her other ability, her high-level cosmetic skill. He realizes with a jolt that her cosmetic skill is even more powerful than her tastelessness. At such a high level, it wouldn't just be makeup, it would be a complete transformation, allowing her to change her entire face. Leveraging his clairvoyant skill, he pushes further, asking about the burn mark he detected on her face. Fairy flinches as if struck, shocked that he could know about that as well. Her composure finally breaks completely. She whispers in defeat, her voice barely audible, acknowledging that he has seen through all of her secrets. She begins her tragic story, recalling a horrible accident in her youth that left her with severe permanent burn scars across her face. The memory is still raw, filled with the pain of a childhood marred by tragedy. The flashback reveals the scarred face she used to have, a stark and painful contrast to her current flawless appearance. She confesses that she grew to hate her own reflection, and had completely abandoned any hope of ever finding love. But one fateful day, a kind young man returned her dropped hat. That man was a young Congis, who instead of recoiling in horror, simply looked at her and called her a cool lady. She was utterly floored by his innocent and blunt compliment. He saw her scar not as a disfigurement but as a life's badge, something that made her look strong and badass. It was a kindness she had never experienced before. She tells the collector that she truly believes that even now, Congis would still be her friend if he knew the truth, just as he was that day. That single simple act of kindness saved her from her despair, and from that moment on, she fell deeply in love with him. She wanted to be with him more than anything, which led her to use her skill to hide the scars she thought would drive him away. With tears in her eyes, she pleads with the collector one last time not to tell Congis about her cosmetic skill. She is terrified that even if he still finds her beautiful, he will never be able to look at her again without seeing the mask she has been wearing all this time. The collector listens, a memory surfacing of another person who felt the same way about deception. He knows that revealing a mask to someone who has only ever known the illusion can lead to a feeling of profound betrayal. He apologizes for meddling as an outsider, but gently explains the harsh reality of her situation. The longer she maintains the lie, the wider the gap between truth and fiction will become, making the eventual shock and hurt for her husband all the more devastating. Fairy nods, a sense of resignation washing over her. She admits that confessing her secret, even to a stranger, has lifted some of the immense guilt that has been crushing her for so long. At that very moment, the door behind them is thrown open with force. Congis stands in the doorway, his face a grim mask, and utters two chilling words: "I heard everything." A wave of absolute shock silences both Fairy and the collector. Their private heartfelt confession has been overheard by the one person it was meant to be kept from. Fairy's face drains of all color, her eyes wide with pure terror as her beloved husband approaches. The secret she guarded for so long is finally brutally exposed. Congis walks directly to her, his voice low but firm, telling her not to underestimate him. He declares that the one thing he cannot bear, the thing he hates more than anything, is to see her suffering. He pulls her into a powerful, encompassing hug, holding her tightly against his chest. He tells her that what he truly loves about her is her dedication, her heart. Tears of shock and relief stream down Fairy's face as she clings to him, the warmth of his embrace washing away years of fear and insecurity. He whispers to her that he will love all of her, her mark, her terrible cooking, everything. He loves her for who she is, not for the face she presents to the world. From the doorway, the collector, Samir, and a smiling Leondole watch the emotional reunion. Congis has proven himself to be a man of incredible character. As Congis comforts his weeping wife, he understands a profound truth. Perhaps this is what real love is, to accept someone completely, flaws and all. Leondold wisely suggests they give the couple some space, proposing they discuss the more practical matter of the skills another day. The scene shifts, time moving forward. Later, at a quiet cafe, the collector asks Sumire for an update on the cooking situation while they enjoy a slice of cake. He takes a thoughtful bite, the sweet dessert a pleasant contrast to the chaotic events of the party. Sumire smiles, explaining that things unfolded just as he had predicted they would. Behind her, a spectral image of the monstrous bento box serves as a comical reminder of the crisis they averted. The collector had explained the situation to Leondold. Lieferi's high-level cosmetic skill was negatively impacting her other abilities, causing her cooking to become a disaster. The aftermath is a picture of pure domestic bliss. Kongus reports that his wife has become even more affectionate, and he happily pays the collector a fee, insisting that she keep her cosmetic skill because he wants her to feel beautiful, while also asking him not to reclaim the disadvantageous tastelessness skill. Sumire laughs, finding the entire situation amusingly romantic, though she'll be reclaiming the tastelessness skill for him. The collector pockets the fee, confirming with a wry smile that he'll be going to buy back the skill now. Sumire teases him for not understanding a girl's heart, but her smile is genuine as she admits there's something sweet about being loved so completely. With his business concluded, the collector sets off to reclaim the problematic skill. He decides on a compromise, thinking it would be best to leave her cosmetic skill at level 1. This way she can still use it to feel confident without it being a complete mask or interfering with her other abilities. He believes this is the best path forward for her. With a lower level skill, she can work through her insecurities over time, perhaps overcoming them completely within a year. As he walks through the sunlit streets, a philosophical thought occurs to him. He muses that both cooking and life itself are always better with a little bit of unexpected spice. With his pack settled on his shoulders, he continues on his way, ready for the next client and the next strange story. It is these interesting, complicated human problems that keep his life as a skill collector forever fascinating. The ancient text lays open, its pages filled with the foundational laws of this world, explaining that skills are not just human abilities but divine blessings granted by the gods themselves. The script details a truth known to few, a concept that fundamentally alters the understanding of the world's creatures. This knowledge reveals that skills are not an exclusively human trait. Even the most fearsome monsters possess their own unique and sometimes terrifying abilities. Powers like Skill Eater or Mind Link are shown, belonging to a draconic beast and a strange, one-eyed plant monster, concepts that deeply intrigue any dedicated skill collector. Yoru pores over the book, his brow furrowed in concentration as he absorbs this new information. He muses that because monsters lack the capacity for language, direct negotiation has always been impossible, a barrier between humanity and the wild creatures of the world. He then looks up from his studies, a new scent catching his attention on the wind. The salty tang of the sea air fills his lungs, and he gazes out at the nearby coastline, seeing a small fishing village nestled by the shore. He decides that this quaint settlement could be a promising location for his unique line of work, a new place to ply his trade. With his large pack secured on his back, he begins his walk across the warm sand toward the collection of rustic buildings. With a friendly and open demeanor, he begins to call out to the villagers passing by, announcing his unusual business proposition. He invites them to feel free to stop by, letting everyone know that he is in the market for any and all unwanted skills they might possess. His strange proclamation quickly draws the attention of the local townsfolk, and soon a man approaches him, a look of cautious curiosity on his face. Yoru gives the man his full attention, ready to listen and eager to see what kind of skills this remote village might have to offer. After a successful morning of transactions, Yori counts the coins in his hand, a satisfied smile on his face. The village is far more lively than he anticipated, proving to be an excellent spot for business, and with his work done for now, he decides it's the perfect time to find a place to eat lunch. While strolling along the beach in search of a meal, a peculiar structure on the edge of the village catches his eye. It's a tall, modern-looking tower that stands in stark contrast to the simple, weathered huts of the fishing community, and he finds himself wondering what such an out-of-place building could possibly be. He eventually finds a small eatery, a simple wooden shack built precariously on a cliffside overlooking the vast blue sea. A waitress brings him a beautifully prepared meal, a whole grilled fish served alongside a colorful bowl of what looks like a fruit salad, a perfect lunch for a warm day. The first bite of the fish is exquisite, and he can't help but be impressed by the quality of the food and the stunning view from his table. He compliments the waitress on the wonderful meal before telling her he has something he'd like to ask about the village. His curiosity getting the better of him, he gestures towards the odd building he spotted earlier, asking the waitress about the strange tower on the village's outskirts. His gaze is fixed on the structure, his mind racing with questions about its purpose. The waitress nonchalantly explains that the building is a house, before adding that it belongs to a local weirdo named Therapy. Yoru is taken aback by her blunt and somewhat dismissive description of the tower's resident. She continues, clarifying that the woman who lives there makes the outlandish claim that she can talk to monsters. While the waitress clearly doesn't believe it, she mentions that the local children find her fascinating and suggests that Yoru should go see for himself if he's that curious about her. This news sends a jolt through Yoru, as the implications of such an ability are immense. The power to communicate with monsters would unlock countless new opportunities for him, and more importantly, it could be a crucial step in his desperate search for his sister, making a visit to this weirdo an absolute necessity. With a renewed sense of purpose, he leaves the small restaurant and makes his way along the coast, his eyes locked on the strange tower. The building stands alone on the beach, a silent, solitary monument against the bright sky. As he stands before the monolithic structure, he can't help but feel a sense of awe at its bizarre design. It looks less like a house and more like a futuristic fortress, confirming that this must be the home of the woman named Therapy. He raises his hand and knocks, the sound echoing strangely against the door's metallic surface. The architecture is unlike anything he's ever seen, reinforcing the feeling that he is about to enter a place far removed from the ordinary world. Unsettled by the strangeness of the door, he decides to use one of his most trusted skills to learn more. Placing his hand on the surface, he activates his level 30 appraisal, causing a faint hexagonal light to emanate from his palm. The results of the appraisal are startling, revealing that the door is imbued with a host of powerful skills like silence, concealment, and even deodorization. He realizes with a jolt that this is no mere door. It is an incredibly rare and powerful artifact known as an ancient relic. A brief overview of ancient relics flashes through his mind, defining them as the technological remnants of a long-lost civilization that once thrived in this world. These artifacts are pieces of a forgotten age, holding power and knowledge far beyond current understanding. The information clarifies that most of these relics are impossibly advanced, their construction methods completely irreplicable by modern means. Their existence is a secret known to very few, a hidden layer of history that most of the world remains blissfully unaware of. He considers his situation, standing before a potentially dangerous relic with no response coming from within. He knows that these ancient artifacts can often be unstable, their power as much a threat as it is a marvel. A part of him wants to turn back, to avoid whatever strange business is happening in this tower, but he hesitates. He activates his presence detection skill, but to his surprise, he senses no one inside, deepening the mystery and his reluctance to leave. He stands conflicted, having come all this way on the rumor of a monster talker, only to be met with a silent, possibly empty fortress. He weighs his options, wondering if he should cut his losses and come back later, or press on despite the risks. Just as he considers turning away, the door slides open with a soft hiss, and a woman with glasses and slightly disheveled hair appears directly behind him. She startles him by politely asking if she can help, her sudden appearance completely bypassing his active detection skill. She yawns, explaining that his knocking woke her from her sleep, confirming with a sleepy smile that he was in fact the one at her door. Her demeanor is surprisingly casual, a stark contrast to the fortress-like home she inhabits. Yoru is completely thrown off balance, stammering an apology for waking her. His mind, however, is consumed by a single baffling question. How did she appear without him sensing her presence at all, even with his skill fully active? He quickly uses his appraisal skill on her, but the results are just as confusing, showing that not only her presence but all of her skills are being blocked by an unknown force. The woman, seemingly oblivious, simply apologizes for sleeping in so late, her cheerful attitude disarming him further. His gaze falls upon the intricate star-shaped necklace she wears, and he immediately realizes it must be another ancient relic, the source of the interference. He introduces himself as a skill collector, explaining that he heard rumors of someone in this village who could communicate with monsters. The moment he mentions monsters, her sleepy demeanor vanishes, replaced by an intense sparkling excitement. She leans in incredibly close, her face inches from his, and eagerly asks if he shares her interest in the creatures. Without waiting for an answer, she launches into a rapid-fire, passionate monologue about her favorite monster types. She discusses her recent obsession with beast types and her specific preference for the chubbier variety of goblins, leaving Yoru utterly bewildered by her eccentric enthusiasm. Her rant continues as she gushes about how adorable monsters are when you raise them, though she concedes that giants might be too large and would likely try to eat her. Yoru is stunned by her casual discussion of domesticating creatures that are universally considered dangerous and hostile. She abruptly stops, a blush rising on her cheeks as she realizes she has gotten completely carried away. She sighs, admitting that this kind of behavior is precisely why the villagers simply label her a weirdo, yet they seem to tolerate her presence without any panic. Overcome with embarrassment, she bows low, profusely apologizing for her outburst and begging him to forget everything she just said. The sudden shift from manic excitement to mortified apology leaves Yoru speechless. He stares at her, completely unsure how to respond to the whirlwind of a conversation he's just experienced. Before he can utter a single word, his instincts scream at him as a faint glow emanates from her chest. In a flash, a brilliant beam of energy erupts from her necklace, shooting directly towards his head with incredible speed. The air crackles as the silent, deadly attack closes the distance in an instant. Yoru is thrown violently backward, his body reacting before his mind can even process the attack. A combination of his passive skills, intuition, barrier and leap activates simultaneously, deflecting the beam and launching him away from the point of impact. He lands hard on the sand, dazed but unharmed, a lingering tingle of energy in the air. He quickly realizes that the skills stored in his items were the only thing that saved him from a devastating blow. Looking up, he sees the woman acting completely normal, as if nothing happened, and he demands to know what the beam was. She puts on a masterful performance of innocence, her eyes wide as she asks what he's talking about, insisting she would never do such a thing. She then turns the accusation back on him, asking with feigned concern if he's feeling alright, as if he's the one acting strangely. He rises to his feet, his expression calm but firm, and tells her that he remembers their conversation perfectly, refusing to be gaslit. They face each other from a distance, the strange tower looming behind them as a silent witness. Therapy is visibly shocked, her facade crumbling as she processes his survival. She mutters to herself in disbelief, wondering how he could be unharmed when the beam was deflected at the very last second and should have struck him cleanly. As the tension between them thickens, a new figure emerges from the open doorway of the tower. A sleek white humanoid golem steps out, its design both elegant and alien, and fixes its gaze upon Yoru. Yoru instantly recognizes the golem's advanced construction, identifying it as another ancient relic. Therapy, meanwhile, seems delighted by his recognition, introducing the golem as Aliaria and noting that it seems to have taken an interest in him. He tries to maintain a defensive posture, but the sheer absurdity of the situation makes it difficult to feel threatened. He can only conclude that the villagers were wrong. This woman wasn't just a weirdo, she was something else entirely. Therapy suddenly begins to bicker with her golem, calling it a meanie and reminding it that she was the one who discovered it and formed their master-servant contract. She petulantly tells Aliaria to be quiet, calling the powerful golem useless. Yoru is taken aback by her harsh words, but Aliaria responds with perfect, robotic calm. The golem clarifies that its current state is only for rebooting purposes, completely unfazed by its master's insult. Aliaria then turns its full attention to Yoru, its voice clinical and direct. It observes that while he presents himself as a merchant, he somehow possessed the means to block its memory erasure beam. Yuri stands his ground, placing himself between Aliaria and Therapy in a subtle protective gesture. He states that he's aware her skills are being concealed and that he has knowledge of ancient relics, confirming his identity as a skill merchant who is far more than he appears. A soft beeping sound comes from Aliaria as it scans him, its internal systems verifying his claims. The golem concludes that he doesn't sound like he's lying, prompting Yoru to properly introduce himself as a skill collector with a deep interest in therapy. He proposes a deal, an exchange of information that seems heavily weighted in his favor. He offers to keep their existence and their ancient relics a secret, and in return, he wants Therapy to tell him everything about her ability to communicate with monsters. Before Therapy can even respond, Aliaria accepts the offer, stealing the punchline right out from under her. A large reflective panel materializes out of thin air beside the golem, and Yoru senses no hostility from either of them as he is invited inside. The interior of the tower is as bizarre as its exterior, a fusion of sterile technology and a makeshift monster sanctuary. In a heavy metal cage, a large furry creature grunts and shifts, its dark eyes watching them warily. Yoru stares at the caged beast, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. He turns to Therapy, a single pressing question on his lips. Why is she really keeping monsters here? Aliaria answers for her, explaining that to understand, he must witness a playback of Therapy's life. Dozens of screens flicker to life around them, displaying images of Therapy from her childhood to the present day. Yoru becomes flustered, insisting that he has no interest in watching a drama and simply wants a direct answer to his question. Therapy, mortified at the prospect of her life being displayed, objects loudly, suggesting they listen to her original poetry instead. She turns to the monster in the cage, seeking its support with a bright smile. She explains to Yoru that her love for monsters is a lifelong passion, and that by pouring her affection into them, a connection was formed. She reveals that, over time she simply began to understand what they were saying, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. When Yoru asks if it's an acquired skill, she shocks him by cheerfully declaring that it's all just hallucinations. Aliaria interjects with a calm beep, confirming that Therapy's self-diagnosis is in fact the truth. Therapy glares at the golem, annoyed at being ignored and confused by its confirmation of her hallucinations. The screens show a montage of a young Therapy happily playing with various creatures, a smaller version of Aliaria always by her side. The golem narrates, explaining that her lifelong immersion in monster research culminated one day in the spontaneous acquisition of a new skill. That skill, Aliaria reveals, was hallucination. The golem explains that this very skill now interacts with her innate desire to understand monsters, creating the illusion of communication. Yoru struggles to comprehend this, realizing her incredible ability is nothing more than a powerful self-induced delusion. Therapy asks Aliaria why it kept this truth from her, and the golem states plainly that she would never have believed it. The golem elaborates that they had to turn away all visitors to protect Therapy and her unusual hobby, which became a problem. The relic necklace was meant to hide her skills from outsiders, and Aliaria adds that it was a convenient bonus that it happened to look good on her, making Yoru feel like a pawn in their strange dynamic. Aliaria then makes a request, asking Yoru to use his appraisal skill on Therapy to see the truth for himself. Though it's phrased as a question, the golem's tone makes it clear it's an order, and Yoru reluctantly complies. The appraisal panel appears, displaying her skills for him to see: hallucination, insensitivity, charm, and presence detection. He stares in disbelief, confirming that the impossible-sounding hallucination skill is very much real. He lets out a heavy sigh, wiping a hand across his forehead in defeat. The hope he felt has evaporated, replaced by the crushing disappointment that true communication with monsters remains nothing more than an impossible fantasy. However, a new idea sparks in his mind. He turns to Therapy and asks if she would be willing to sell him her hallucination skill, suggesting that if she doesn't want it, he could purchase it. The suggestion is met with an indignant growl from both Therapy and her caged monster. Sometime later, Yoru stands outside the tower once more, speaking with Aliaria as the day comes to a close. The setting sun casts long dark shadows across the sand. Aliaria asks him what purpose a merchant would have for speaking with monsters. Yoru clutches a locket hanging from his neck, his expression turning serious as he explains it was to expand his business, and, more importantly, to find someone. The golem's optical sensor focuses on the locket, identifying it as containing a portrait and calling his motive sentimental. Yoru asks it to stop scanning his personal belongings, his voice firm. Aliaria's gaze shifts from the locket to the distant village, and it makes a stunning declaration. The golem states that it saw the woman from the portrait just the other day. Yuri's eyes widen in shock, his heart pounding in his chest as he asks for confirmation. Aliaria affirms its statement, explaining that it saw her in a small village south of their location, while on a monster field survey with Therapy. The golem continues its description, explaining that the woman stood out from the crowd. She was providing free appraisals to anyone who needed one, both the local villagers and travelers passing through. A storm of emotions clouds Yori's face as his hand instinctively tightens on his shirt. He already knows what they called her, the title she was given by the people she helped. Alioria confirms his unspoken thought, revealing that the people called this benevolent woman the saint. A memory surfaces in Yori's mind, a vision of his blonde-haired sister, her gentle smile shining as she was surrounded by grateful people. The wagon driver bids him farewell, wishing him a safe journey as the carriage pulls away, leaving him alone on the dusty road. With a final glance back, he turns towards the horizon, a vast and uncertain path stretching out before him toward the distant coastline. He breaks into a frantic run, his large backpack bouncing with every desperate stride. No matter how fast he pushes his body, the frantic beating of his heart refuses to subside, his mind a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation. Cresting a hill, he finally lays his eyes upon a small secluded village nestled in the valley below. He clutches a small object in his hand, a nervous tremor running through him as he whispers the single fateful word he has been chasing for so long: Saint. A wave of grim relief washes over his face, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and unwavering resolve. After all this time, after all the pain and searching, he believes he has finally found his sister. His mind flashes back to the most horrific night of his life, the night his hometown was consumed by a brutal massacre. So many years have passed since that tragedy, yet the images of fire and death are burned forever into his memory. This single piece of information, a whisper of a saint in a remote village, was the first real lead he had managed to find in all that time. It was a faint glimmer of hope discovered alongside his companions in a far-off land, a lead he had to pursue no matter the cost. He stares down at the peaceful-looking town, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. Even if this is all an elaborate trap designed to lure him in, he knows he has no other choice but to walk into it. He asks a local farmer about the saint, who confirms she isn't in this particular village, but can be found beyond the nearby forest. The old man sternly warns him not to venture there merely out of curiosity, his tone heavy with caution. The villagers explain that the saint has become famous for giving free appraisals to anyone who seeks her out, a seemingly benevolent act. However, a dark rumor hangs over her name, as several people from the area have mysteriously vanished recently. The mention of missing people triggers a painful memory of his sister's true power. He recalls how she would disguise her plunder skill as a simple appraisal, using it to steal the abilities of anyone she judged to be useless. He offers the villagers a confident smile, thanking them for the warning but insisting that he must see the saint for himself. They cry out, telling him the forest is dangerous and filled with monsters, but his mind is already made up. As he sprints through the dense woods, a monstrous beast with a flower for a face erupts from the trees with a deafening roar. His thoughts scream in silent anguish, questioning why his sister, who seemed to have everything, would ever need to steal skills from others. With a swift motion, he unleashes a powerful torrent of wind magic, his own skills more than a match for the forest's dangers. The question continues to haunt him, a burning mystery that drives him ever forward. The monster is instantly defeated, its dark blood splattering across the ground and onto his clothes, but he doesn't break his stride. He pushes onward past the roaring creature's demise, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Leaving the dissolving corpse of the beast in his wake, he redoubles his pace, his internal voice echoing his resolve. He knows he cannot afford to waste a single moment here. His destination is too important. His thoughts turn to the terrible legacy of his sister's skill, plunder. It is an infamous and exceedingly rare ability, capable of being held by only one person at a time, and every one of its previous wielders was a notorious villain in the annals of history. He recalls the legends of those who came before her, a merciless king who stole everything to seize a throne, and a corrupted hero who betrayed his own comrades and plotted to bring about the end of the world. The skill was a curse, a path to ruin for all who possessed it. A softer, more painful memory surfaces, a time when he and his sister embraced, a moment of pure innocence. He tortures himself with the thought that if only the previous user of plunder had lived longer, his sister might never have inherited this terrible fate. He forcefully shakes the thought from his head, dismissing it as a meaningless and pointless fantasy. What's done is done, and all he seeks now is not to change the past, but to find an answer for the present, the reason why his sister feels she has to plunder. He presses on through the winding forest path, his face etched with exhaustion and sheer force of will. The journey has been long and arduous, but he can feel that he is finally getting close. At last he emerges from the tree line and looks down upon the village he was told about. It's a quiet, isolated settlement, the very place the saint is said to reside. Without a moment's hesitation, he begins his descent, running down the grassy slope toward the town. The time for caution and information gathering is over. He must now face what awaits him. He pauses for a brief moment to catch his breath, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. A small cut on his cheek, a souvenir from his battle in the forest, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers he has already overcome. As he observes the quiet houses, he notes that the village has a nostalgic countryside feeling, reminding him so much of the hometown he lost. He pushes the feeling aside, reminding himself that his first priority must be to locate the saint. He knows he must be careful, as revealing his true identity could be disastrous if this is indeed a trap. He decides that the quickest and safest way to find her is to pose as someone else and discreetly ask the locals for information. He steels his resolve, putting on a new persona as he approaches the village gates. He tells himself that for now, he is not the collector of discarded skills, but merely an ordinary traveling merchant. The two guards at the gate express their surprise at seeing a merchant in such a remote place. He plays his part perfectly, explaining with a friendly smile that he was simply hoping to find new business opportunities. He then feigns a look of pleasant surprise, telling the guards that he also heard this was the home of the famous Saint Sama. He adds that he was hoping to receive one of her free appraisals, crafting a perfect excuse for his presence. The guards' faces light up, and they eagerly confirm the rumors, gushing about how wonderful and beautiful their saint is. He listens to their praise, his expression calm and neutral, hiding the turmoil within. When he asks where he can find her, the guards point him toward a house on a hill at the edge of the village. They add a half-hearted warning for him not to get any strange ideas, their tone suggesting they believe no one could possibly be a threat to her. He smiles and assures them he will keep their warning in mind. The guards continue their praise, mentioning that the saint is a master of all sorts of powerful magic. As he sets up a small stall in the village square, he understands the reason for the guards' carelessness. The villagers told him everything so easily because they have absolute unwavering faith in their saint's strength, believing her to be untouchable. The locals are just as effusive, telling him how the Saint Sama gives everyone free appraisals every week, and even offers advice on developing their abilities. They describe her as a kind and wonderful person, beloved by all. He carefully brings up the rumors he'd heard about missing people, and the villagers confirm them without hesitation. But their faith remains unshaken. They are completely certain that as long as the saint is with them, the missing will be found and returned safely. He looks down at the trinkets on his stall, a shadow falling over his face as he thinks of his sister. These people place so much trust and faith in her, completely unaware of the terrifying truth. After thanking the townspeople, he packs up and heads toward the path leading out of the village. They tell him the Saint Sama lives in the house on the hill, a fact that strikes a deeply personal and unsettling chord within him. His mind is cast back to his childhood, to a time when his own parents had abandoned him. It was his sister Nisan, who was always with him in their house on a hill, her presence his only solace. He remembers the fights he would get into as a child, and how he would always return home, bruised and battered, to the one person who was always waiting for him. He stops abruptly, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stares at the house before him. It is a quaint two-story home at the top of the hill, and a chilling realization makes him whisper that this must be some kind of sick joke. His hand clenches into a fist as he approaches the front door. The architecture undeniably, impossibly, the same as his childhood home. He takes a breath and announces himself as a traveling merchant, here to meet the saint. When no answer comes, he pushes the door open and cautiously steps inside. The interior is still and silent, filled with a heavy, expectant air as he moves from the entryway into the main room. The room is lined with bookshelves. Just as he remembers, though, a layer of dust covers everything. A brief phantom memory flashes before his eyes, his sister smiling brightly as she carries a stack of books. He stands frozen in the center of the room, his gaze darting around in a panic. Every detail, from the placement of the windows to the layout of the furniture, is an exact replica of the home he lost. His eyes land on a picture hanging on the wall, and the last of his composure shatters. He has a vivid memory of being a small boy, helping his sister hang that very same painting in that very same spot. He moves deeper into the impossible house, his voice trembling as he calls out his sister's name. A profound sense of dread guides his feet as he approaches the bottom of the staircase. His breath catches in his throat as he calls out to her again, his voice now barely a whisper. The familiar shape of the wooden banister feels both like a memory and a nightmare made real. And there, at the top of the stairs, a lone figure stands with her back to him, her long blonde hair cascading down her back. The room she occupies is a study, filled with books and bathed in a soft ethereal light. The camera focuses on her feet, poised elegantly on the wooden floorboards. The silence in the house is absolute, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. Slowly she turns to face him, a gentle, welcoming smile gracing her lips. Her expression is one of serene acceptance, as if she has been waiting for this very moment. She places a delicate hand over her heart, her eyes meeting his across the distance. In a soft, calm voice, she confirms his deepest fears and hopes, welcoming home her dear brother. The young man stood inside the dimly lit study, the scent of old paper and dust thick in the air as he faced the woman who wore his sister's face. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and writhe, mirroring the unease coiling in his stomach. The chapter title hanging in the air confirmed his deepest fear. He was facing an impostor. A strange, unsettling smile spread across her features, her eyes devoid of the warmth he knew so well. The illusion shattered completely, leaving behind a cold, unnerving realization that this person was a complete stranger. She was a phantom, a mimic wearing a beloved mask for some unknown, sinister purpose. He gathered his courage, his voice steady despite the tremor of confusion that ran through him. He cautiously asked if she was the Saint Sama that the villagers had spoken of, the revered figure who had taken up residence in this quiet town. He needed answers, and this seemed to be the only thread he could pull. With a dismissive, almost playful wave of her hand, she confessed that she was merely imitating the true saint, a pale reflection of her supposed excellence. When he pressed further, asking if she knew his sister, her expression shifted into one of fanatical reverence. She corrected him, explaining that a simple word like no could not possibly capture the depth of her feelings, which were on an entirely different plane of existence. Her hands clasped together near her heart, her eyes shining with an unnerving, worshipful light. She began to gush about the saint's qualities, describing her as a wise and noble being who wielded the power of all things, a goddess walking among mortals. She admitted that her adoration was so profound that she had gone as far as to copy the saint's very appearance, a testament to her absolute devotion. Leaning forward conspiratorially, a sliver of pride mixed with a desperate need for approval in her gaze, she asked for his opinion. She wanted to know if her imitation was convincing, if she looked similar enough to the woman she so clearly idolized. He took a small step back, the intensity of her fanaticism making him deeply uncomfortable. He conceded that from a distance the resemblance was uncanny, and that he could have easily been fooled, but he quickly brushed the compliment aside, his expression hardening as he demanded to know the whereabouts of his real sister. The woman turned her back to him, her posture radiating an arrogant superiority. She scoffed at the very notion that his sister, Her Excellency, would ever be found in such a pathetic, backwater village. In fact, she claimed such a being wouldn't even be in this country at all. She settled into a chair, her pose dominant and her smile widening into a sinister grin. With chilling delight, she revealed a world-shattering secret. The saint had already seized control of an entire nation on the continent, and her ambitions did not stop there. She was now actively plotting to conquer the entire world. The words struck him like a physical blow, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated shock. His mind struggled to process the information, to reconcile the image of his kind sister with this portrait of a ruthless, power-hungry tyrant. The impostor seemed to relish his stunned silence, continuing her tale with an air of smug satisfaction. She confirmed that his sister was far too busy with her grand ambitions to be bothered with him. He could only stammer, trying to form a coherent question in the face of this unbelievable revelation. His world felt like it was tilting on its axis as he tried to understand. He recounted how he had been diligently training his skills as a skill collector, completely oblivious to his sister's supposed transformation into a would-be world conqueror. He desperately questioned why she would embark on such a dark path. The woman looked down upon him, her expression a mixture of pity and contempt. She found it utterly baffling that he, the saint's own younger brother, could be so ignorant of his sister's true nature and intentions. She declared that she, a mere admirer, understood the saint far better than he ever did, despite their shared blood. Leaning in close, her voice dripped with venom as she delivered a final, cruel verdict. He was nothing special to his sister at all. But his spirit was not so easily broken. He stood his ground, his gaze firm as he looked past her towards the silent, watching bookshelves. He declared that it was precisely because he didn't understand her that he refused to give up, that he would continue searching for clues about what had happened to her. His eyes narrowed with unwavering resolve. This was not something he was doing as a stranger or an acquaintance. He was doing this as her family, a bond that transcended any simple admiration or worship. His words ignited a furious spark in the impostor's eyes, her cheerful facade melting away to reveal a core of pure rage. Lightning began to crackle between her fingertips as she hissed at his perceived arrogance. She could not fathom the idea that he believed he was the only one special to the saint. The air grew heavy with menace, the single word unpleasant echoing her thoughts. The scene shifted to the exterior of the quaint house, a silent witness to the storm of violence that was about to be unleashed within its walls. Without warning, a massive bolt of lightning tore through the roof, striking the very spot where he had been standing moments before. The floorboards exploded into splinters, and he was violently thrown backward by the concussive force. A cry of pain ripped from his throat. He landed in a heap outside, his body aching as he stared back at the smoking hole in the house. The attack had been instantaneous and utterly lethal, leaving no doubt in his mind that this woman intended to kill him. Back inside the ruined room, the impostor looked on, surprised that he had survived her initial assault. He quickly assessed his own status, realizing that his stored skills had saved him. Instinct, barrier, and jump had activated subconsciously, allowing him to dodge the deadly magic just in the nick of time. He recalled the villagers' words about the Saint Sama wielding a variety of magic, a fact the impostor now confirmed. She chillingly relayed a message from the saint herself. She was permitted to deal with any nuisances as she pleased, her hand gesturing as if preparing another spell. Her voice dropped to a cold, murderous whisper as she offered to erase him from existence for the sake of Her Excellency. As she spoke, a swirling vortex of water materialized around her, and he braced himself for the next magical onslaught. The torrent of water shot towards him, but he reacted instantly, erecting a level 30 barrier to block the attack. He yelled through the magical shield, pleading that he only wanted to get information about his sister from her. The powerful water spell crashed against his shimmering barrier, the sheer force of it a testament to her power. He understood with grim certainty that she was not testing him. She was trying to execute him. She dismissed his skill as a mere nuisance and commanded him to die. A sadistic smile played on her lips as she watched him struggle, clearly enjoying the power she held over him. She taunted him, asking how he would possibly deal with her next attack, as the water began to shift and reform. The water surged past his barrier, enveloping him in a crushing liquid prison that made it impossible to breathe. A terrifying thought crossed his mind. He wondered if she, like his sister, possessed the plunder skill, allowing her to steal abilities from others. But he quickly dismissed the idea, clinging to a core truth he knew about rare skills. The plunder skill was unique, with only one user capable of existing in any given era. As long as his sister was alive, it was impossible for this impostor to have the same ability. His lungs burned for air as the water crushed him, his mind racing for a solution. He felt completely helpless, unable to figure out the source of her power without a way to analyze her skills. He desperately tried to activate his appraisal skill, but a powerful force blocked it completely. His eyes darted to her neck, where a shimmering star-shaped necklace hung an ancient relic, just like the one his sister's therapist used to wear, and he knew it was the source of the interference. Realizing the necklace was the key, he summoned a blast of wind magic in a desperate attempt to create an opening. The gale-force winds pushed back the suffocating water, giving him a precious moment to breathe and plan his next move. The woman seemed momentarily impressed by his resourcefulness, noting that he had managed to repel her attack. He knew his only chance was to close the distance and get that necklace, a difficult task against a long-range magic user. Her eyes took on that fanatical gleam once more as she fantasized aloud about her potential reward. She mused that presenting his dead body to Her Excellency would surely earn her immense praise, a truly delightful prospect. Hearing this, his resolve hardened into steel. He knew it was an incredible risk, a gamble with his own life, but he saw no other way forward. He lunged toward her, just as thick, thorny vines erupted from the floorboards to stop him. The vines coiled around his body like serpents, their thorns digging into his flesh and tearing at his clothes. The impostor watched with a smug, victorious expression, declaring that he was finished, and that she would end him now. But this was the moment he had been waiting for. He revealed a silver locket from his pocket, snapping it open to show a cherished photograph of himself and his sister as children. The sight of the photo made the impostor freeze, her concentration shattered and her impending attack faltering. "Now," he roared, activating his blink skill in that single moment of hesitation. The world blurred around him as he vanished from her sight, taking advantage of the critical opening he had created. In less than a heartbeat, he reappeared directly behind her, his hand reaching for the source of her power. Her eyes widened in panic as she realized her mistake, and he coldly informed her that he could finally see her skills. A spectral panel materialized in his vision, revealing her true ability, mimicry plunder at level 20. It was not the real skill, but a copy, and below it was a list of all the magic she had imitated from the villagers. With a swift motion, he tore the protective necklace from her neck, his appraisal skill finally breaking through her defenses. He confirmed his theory about her mimicry skill as she shrieked in outrage, demanding he return the precious gift she had received from her excellency. She lunged at him in a desperate, frantic attempt to retrieve the necklace, her composure completely gone. He easily sidestepped her clumsy attack, grabbing her and using his super strength and binding skills to slam her onto the floor. He pinned her down, coldly telling her that her blind panic had caused her to let her guard down completely. He dangled the locket in front of her face, revealing the depth of his knowledge. He explained that he knew her mimicry skill could only copy one famous skill at a time, then made a shocking offer. He would give her his own plunder skill. The woman was stunned into silence by his insight. He continued, explaining that he had obsessively researched plunder ever since he and his sister had parted ways. He even theorized that resistance-type skills might be able to block it, a detail he was keen to test. She finally broke, telling him to shut up, her face a mask of bitter frustration. She spat that it didn't matter, because her skill was, and always would be, just an imitation. A painful memory surfaced, showing her as a young, lonely girl. She recalled copying lightning magic, simply because she thought it was cool, wanting nothing more than to be a powerful mage like the other children. But her attempts to fit in were met with scorn and cruelty. The other children ganged up on her, calling her a dirty copycat and ostracizing her for her unique ability. They threw stones at her, their insults echoing in her mind, calling her garbage and scum. She was bullied relentlessly, tormented for the very nature of the skill she had been born with. Lying in the dirt, tears streaming down her face, she cried out to a world that felt so unfair. She despaired over why she couldn't choose her own skills, lamenting the cruel fate of being born with mimicry. It was then that a gentle hand rested on her head, and she looked up to see the saint. The saint told her not to devalue herself, insisting that her skill was not worthless. In a transformative act of kindness, the saint encouraged her to try and mimic her own plunder skill, promising that she would always be on her side. The memory faded, bringing him back to the present. He tightened his grip, his voice low and urgent as he repeated his demand. He ordered her to tell him where his sister was, reminding her of the vast arsenal of skills he possessed. But her spirit, forged in loneliness and reforged by fanaticism, was unyielding. She glared back at him with pure defiance, telling him that he didn't stand a chance and that the outcome was not his to decide. He retorted that they wouldn't know the result until the very end. But just as he spoke, his intuition skill screamed a warning of imminent, overwhelming danger. A terrifying dark energy erupted from her body in a violent, uncontrolled explosion. The entire house was instantly obliterated, the structure bursting apart in a catastrophic detonation of raw power. He was flung through the air like a rag doll, tossed helplessly amidst the storm of splintered wood and shattered stone. The woman remained at the epicenter of the blast, her body consumed by the very power she had unleashed in her final desperate act. He crashed to the ground, his body battered and bleeding, but his sturdy and barrier skills had saved his life once again. He pushed himself up, groaning in pain as he surveyed the absolute devastation around him. He staggered to his feet, staring in disbelief at the smoldering crater where the building once stood. He couldn't comprehend the level of destructive power she had just unleashed. Searching the wreckage, he found her lifeless body. It was clear she had used a high-level self-destruct spell, sacrificing her own life to try and take him with her. He clutched the star-shaped necklace, the chilling reality of the situation crashing down on him. This wasn't just admiration, it was pure, unadulterated fanaticism. He was horrified to realize his sister had kept someone so dangerously devoted by her side, while plotting to conquer the world. From the tree line at the edge of the village, a lone, cloaked figure watched impassively as the townsfolk began to run towards the plume of smoke and debris. The figure, the true saint, noted with cold detachment that the woman had died. She acknowledged that her follower had been strong and that her death was a shame, but ultimately it had been her own wish. Her final thought on the matter was that her fanatical servant had achieved her greatest desire, to die for her master. With nothing more to see, the saint turned her back on the chaos she had orchestrated and walked away, disappearing silently into the woods. The young man sits alone in a quiet tavern, reflecting on his recent encounters while finishing a meal. A title card hangs in the air, a silent declaration that this brief moment is an interlude focused on the dangerous and unpredictable nature of testing skills. He quietly contemplates the unique abilities of the sister he met, a faint image of her appearing in his mind's eye. Her particular set of skills had truly taken him by surprise. Charm, allure, and seduction all at level 7, paradoxically paired with a level 5 insensitivity. He continues to muse on the strangeness of the world, concluding that reality is often far more bizarre than any work of fiction. While he was aware of countless skill combinations, from the psychological to the overtly magical, he had never conceived of one quite like the nuns. A spark of curiosity ignited within him, prompting him to conduct a small experiment for himself. A determined look crosses his face as he decides to replicate her skill set on himself. He wonders what would happen if he activated charm, allure, seduction, and insensitivity all at once. The potential outcomes were a mystery, and his curiosity was simply too powerful to ignore. Having made his decision, he glances at his own reflection, noting that there's no visible change on the surface. Convinced that the experiment is ready, he calls over a nearby waitress to settle his bill. As he stands and leans forward to speak with the waitress, the activated skills begin to work their magic. He simply asks for the bill and his backpack, his movements and voice now imbued with an unnatural, captivating quality that immediately draws the young woman's attention. The waitress is instantly thrown into a state of complete bewilderment, her cheeks flushing a deep red. She stammers a response, her professional demeanor completely crumbling under the weight of his overwhelming presence. Promising to bring the bill right away, he offers her a gentle, disarming smile and thanks her for the meal, entirely unaware of the devastating effect he is having. The waitress stares back, her eyes spiraling as she is completely mesmerized, her mind struggling to process the intense feelings his aura is generating. Her thoughts race as she tries to make sense of her reaction, wondering when this customer, whom she thinks of as Collector San, started wearing his shirt so unbuttoned. She suddenly notices a scent like men's cologne wafting from him, a detail her charmed mind has likely invented to rationalize her intense attraction. As he turns to depart, the waitress calls out desperately, her voice trembling as she begs him to come again soon. In the background, a status window confirms his active skills: charm, allure, seduction, and insensitivity, all roaring at level 7. Just as he steps away, a wave of cold dread washes over the young man. As he realizes his critical mistake, he clutches his head in sheer panic, remembering with horror that he had left his insensitivity skills active the entire time. In the tavern behind him, the waitress is left reeling, questioning her own inexplicable behavior. With intelligence gathering now in Michael's capable hands, he resolved to continue his own business while awaiting further news. He possessed skills for information gathering himself, like eavesdropping, but he was keenly aware that he lacked the practical experience to use them effectively. Deciding now was the time to change that, he found a quiet alleyway to test his level 30 eavesdropping skill. He pressed himself against the wall, trying to listen in on a passing couple, though his posture made him look incredibly suspicious to any onlookers. He was almost immediately caught in the act, a voice from behind startling him by asking just what he was doing there. Trying to feign innocence, he spun around with a nervous smile, asking if he perhaps looked suspicious, a question that was painfully obvious. The person who had discovered him was a kind-faced, elderly priest, who simply offered a gentle smile. He told the young man that the Lord sees even the tiniest of deeds, a soft but clear admonishment for his questionable behavior. The protagonist, caught red-handed, could only scratch the back of his head in embarrassment and apologize for being stopped. He assured the priest he would keep his words in mind as he tried to make a hasty exit from the awkward situation. As he walked away, he overheard two young boys whispering about how an adult was just getting scolded by a priest. His eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced back, confirming that the old man was indeed a member of the clergy. He found himself standing before the man's place of work, a modest church with a large simple cross adorning its peak. The priest stood at the bottom of the steps, a welcoming presence before the house of God. A shadow crossed the protagonist's face as he stared at the building, a flood of unpleasant memories washing over him. He had no fond recollections of the church, as it was the very institution that had branded him as worthless during his youth, a painful and defining moment in his past. The priest, oblivious to his inner turmoil, warmly invited him inside, stating that the church was a place of rest for all people. The young man, however, forced a strained smile and politely stated his preference not to enter the building. Not deterred, the priest then offered to have his skills appraised within the church, a common service they provided. He once again declined, explaining that he had work to do collecting skills and needed to be on his way. The moment he mentioned collecting skills, the priest's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a look of stern disapproval. His voice grew cold as he declared that from the perspective of one who serves God, the act of trading skills was nothing short of blasphemous. Sensing an impending lecture, the protagonist decided it was best to leave before he was scolded for a second time. Just as he turned to go, the priest called out for him to wait, a strange urgency in his voice. Assuming a sermon was about to begin, he tried to politely excuse himself, stating he had another engagement. The priest quickly clarified that this wasn't about his official duties, but rather a personal matter of great importance. Leaning in conspiratorially, the priest whispered, asking if he would be willing to discuss something privately. Though hesitant, the protagonist found himself agreeing to the strange request. He was led away from the street and into the priest's personal living quarters, a small humble room situated behind the main church building. He stepped inside, taking in the Spartan but clean surroundings. The priest apologized for troubling him so late in the evening, his expression grave and serious. He wasted no more time, asking the young man directly what business a skill collector might have with him. Internally, the protagonist was completely baffled, wondering why this stern, devout priest would ever seek out someone with his particular profession. He fumbled for words, struggling to phrase his question about the nature of this secret meeting. Sensing his confusion, the priest cut to the chase with surprising directness. He leaned forward and asked if the skill collector also dealt in skills that might be considered unworthy. The term unworthy before God was a new one, but he understood the implication and confirmed that he did. The priest then made a simple but profound request, for the young man to use his appraisal skill on him, right here and now. The results of the appraisal began to filter into his vision, displaying the priest's various skills. One line in particular stood out, shining with a glaring intensity: libido, level 20. The full list painted a picture of a man struggling with himself, possessing mundane skills like appraisal and psychology, but also an incredibly high-level libido. The priest sat perfectly still, his hands clutching the book in his lap, awaiting the judgment he knew was coming. The protagonist's eyes widened in disbelief, his mind reeling from the discovery. It was true. This man of God was burdened by an immense worldly desire. He quickly analyzed the data, recognizing that while the libido skill itself was common, a level of 20 was extreme and almost unheard of. Normally, such a high level would drive a person to criminal acts, yet this priest was somehow managing to hold himself together, a testament to his willpower. The priest's composure finally broke, and he cried out in anguish, calling himself a disgrace for a man of the cloth to be afflicted with such indecency. The protagonist calmly shushed him, reminding him that he often received such requests, and advised him to speak more quietly if he wished to keep this a secret. The confession that followed was shocking, as the priest admitted the sheer intensity of his affliction. He confessed that even inanimate objects like the legs of a desk could appear obscene to him, and he lived in constant fear of losing control and harming his believers. The protagonist, though outwardly calm, found the situation deeply unsettling. After a moment of thought, he explained that purchasing a skill at such a high level would currently exceed his budget. He proposed returning another day to complete the transaction, an offer the priest gratefully accepted. A wave of immense relief washed over the old man, who slumped in his chair, thankful that his suffering would soon end. He then revealed a crucial detail, explaining that his libido level had only started surging since she had arrived at the church. The mention of a woman piqued the protagonist's curiosity, and at that very moment a soft voice called from the hallway. A woman was asking the father if everything was all right, having been drawn by the sound of their loud voices. A nun appeared in the doorway, her face slightly flushed as if she had run there. The priest, flustered, quickly invented a story about speaking with a merchant to order new equipment for the church. The nun accepted his explanation with a knowing smile, pressing a finger to her lips in a gesture that seemed far too alluring for a woman of her station. Her eyes twinkled with a strange light as she looked between the two men. Without warning, she let out a small cry and pitched forward, tripping over her own feet in a dramatic fall. Her black habit flew up as she tumbled, giving the protagonist an unimpeded view that left him utterly stunned. The priest immediately rushed to her side, his concern genuine as he asked if she was hurt. She simply apologized for the interruption, claiming that she had tripped and needed assistance getting up. His suspicions aroused, the protagonist activated his appraisal skill, believing the fall was no accident. The results that appeared before him were a shocking combination of potent abilities: charm level 7, allure level 7, and arousal level 7. But the final skill listed was the most confounding of all: insensitivity, at level 5. The protagonist stared in bewilderment, completely unable to make sense of such a contradictory set of skills. The nun, still on the floor, had a brief lucid thought about the strange skill combination, musing that not even a succubus would be so direct. This confirmed she was, on some level, aware of the power she wielded. Both the priest and the protagonist were frozen in place, their faces flushed with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. After a moment, the nun simply excused herself, leaving them in a stunned silence. The protagonist immediately understood everything, turning to the priest and asking if she was the one he had been talking about. The priest confirmed it, explaining that her arrival and her powerful unseen skills were the reason his own urges had spiraled out of control. He went on to explain her tragic situation. She had been constantly harassed by men before seeking sanctuary at the church. While the church offered protection, her presence created an entirely new problem, one of which the nun herself seemed completely oblivious. The priest slammed his fist on the table in frustration, revealing the core of the issue. Her insensitivity skill rendered her completely unaware of the powerful, arousing effect she had on others. He theorized that her parents must have intentionally hidden her other skills from her, a deception the church's own appraisal system was designed not to break. Just then, the nun poked her head back into the room, announcing that she had forgotten to tell them something important. She proudly declared that she had been training diligently to become a proper sister. The priest's initial delight turned to sheer horror as she continued, explaining that she wanted to test a new skill she believed she had learned: appraisal. And the first person she intended to appraise was herself. She was practically giddy with excitement, believing that appraisal had been added to what she thought was her only skill: insensitivity. The two men could only watch, their faces pale with terror at the impending disaster. With a cheerful good night, she left them to their panic. The priest whispered that this was the worst possible outcome, for if she were to learn the truth about her own skills, the consequences would be catastrophic. An entire week passed, the city going about its business under a calm sky. Fourth, the protagonist returned to the church, cash in hand, ready to complete his transaction, to buy the priest's libido skill. He was met at the door by the priest, who looked utterly distraught and told him that now was not the right time. The old man's face was a mask of despair as he cried out the sister's name. With a choked voice, he delivered the terrible news: she was gone. The church grounds were in a state of chaos as a search party was organized. The priest explained that she had been missing since that very morning, having vanished without a trace. A single letter had been left behind on her perfectly made bed. It was a confession, a heart-wrenching note in which she called herself a disgrace to her faith and declared that she must be punished for her tainted nature. The protagonist quickly pieced it together. She must have succeeded in appraising herself and discovered the truth. He set aside his business, telling the priest that finding the devout believer was now their top priority. He immediately activated his own skills, combining his level 30 presence detection and smell to search for her trail. He closed his eyes, focusing all of his senses on the desperate task of tracking her down before it was too late. His search led him to the edge of a dark and foreboding forest on the outskirts of the city. He knew that no one would enter such a gloomy place by choice, a chilling realization of the sister's intent. He turned to the priest, his voice filled with urgency, warning him that they had to hurry. He feared that if they didn't find her soon, something terrible was going to happen. Deep within the oppressive gloom of the trees, the sister stood beneath a sturdy branch, a coarse rope clutched in her hands. She whispered a prayer for forgiveness, her spirit broken as she prepared to end her own life. Suddenly the protagonist's presence detection flared, locking onto her location. He shouted that he had found her, just as the priest screamed her name, his voice cracking with fear and desperation. They burst into the clearing just in time to see her placing the crude noose around her own neck. Her face was pale and stained with tears, her eyes empty as she resigned herself to her fate. Without a moment's hesitation, the protagonist unleashed a blade of wind magic, slicing cleanly through the rope. As the sister stumbled, the priest lunged forward, catching her in a desperate embrace. She struggled against him, sobbing that she never knew she possessed such filthy, unholy skills. She begged him to let her go, to let her complete her final terrible act of penance. In her frantic struggle, she tore at her own habit, ripping the fabric in her distress. She cried out that she could no longer go on living, that she was unfit to stand before God. The priest held her firmly, his voice cutting through her despair. He looked her directly in the eye and told her that if she was unworthy, then he was unworthy as well. The protagonist then made a strange tactical interruption, pointing out that her clothes were torn and her current state was quite indecent. The comment was so unexpected that it momentarily broke the sister's hysterical state. The priest seized the opportunity, urging the sister to use her newfound skill and appraise him. He insisted she see the truth, to understand that she was not the only one burdened with what she perceived as tainted skills. Her tear-filled eyes widened as she focused on him, her appraisal skill activating. The priest met her gaze without flinching, ready to reveal his deepest, most shameful secret. He calmly and clearly stated the truth for her to see and hear. He confessed that his own libido skill was at level 20. He then asked if it frightened her to be touched by someone so dangerous, a person like him. As he spoke, the protagonist's own appraisal noted a critical detail. The priest's reason skill was also at level 20, the only thing keeping his immense desire in check. A single tear escaped the priest's eye as he apologized for frightening her, admitting that he too was a flawed and tainted human being. He looked away, unable to bear the shame of his confession. He explained his original plan, how he had tried to suppress his desire with his own willpower, and how he had intended to rely on the merchant to erase the skill entirely. But now, looking at the sister's despair, he had made a new resolution. With a voice full of newfound conviction, he declared that all skills are blessings from God, even the ones that seem tainted. He proclaimed that these challenges must be accepted and overcome, for that is the trial that God has set before them. He reached out his hand, his expression soft but resolute, and asked her to face this trial with him. He offered not a cure but companionship on the difficult road ahead. Hope returned to the sister's eyes as she tearfully accepted his hand. She admitted that she had been wrong, and she agreed to walk this path with him, together. In that moment the scene was transformed, appearing like a sacred mural of two saints finding redemption, surrounded by a heavenly choir of angels. They pledged to strive forward as servants of God, their faith renewed and strengthened by their shared vulnerability. Watching from the side, the protagonist could only offer a dry internal commentary. He noted that the scene did indeed look like something from a holy text, if one could ignore the massive sweat stains soaking the back of the priest's robes. He brought a hand to his face, the full reality of the situation crashing down on him. Because the priest had chosen to overcome his skill rather than sell it, the negotiation had completely and utterly failed. As he turned to leave, the revitalized priest and sister thanked him profusely for his help. He could barely register their words, his mind stuck on the fact that all his effort had ultimately resulted in no profit. They warmly invited him to visit the church again, offering their assistance should he ever need it. He gave a vague, non-committal reply, still processing the strange turn of events. Walking away from the church, he felt an odd sensation. Despite the failed business deal, he felt that he understood the people within that building a little bit better now, feeling a strange new connection to the place he once despised. The young woman explained that she had heard about his peculiar business from Sumir-chan and wanted to consult him, as she heard he was quite knowledgeable about the strange powers known as skills. Our protagonist confirmed his profession, introducing himself as a collector who deals in unwanted skills, ready to offer whatever assistance he could. She began her story explaining that she had recently inherited a piece of land from a relative, but there was something deeply unsettling and strange about the property. As she spoke, the overhead view shows the trio seated in the quiet cafe, the atmosphere growing more serious as she detailed the unnerving rumors surrounding the land. She elaborated that whenever anyone, including herself, approached the property, they would begin to feel unwell, and neighbors whispered that a homeless person with a bizarre skill had taken up residence there. As a mere merchant, she felt powerless to resolve the situation, apologizing for bringing him such an unusual request. But Samira chimed in, noting how truly troubled her friend was, and that he was the only one she could rely on. Seeing the earnest pleas of both women, he accepted the job without hesitation, agreeing to investigate the site and asking her to lead the way. They traveled by carriage for some time, the pastoral landscape rolling by as the three of them sat together, the gravity of their destination hanging in the air. After a while, the young merchant announced their arrival, pointing towards a small village nestled in the hills just ahead. As they disembarked and walked closer, a strange ruined tower came into view, perched precariously on the edge of a jagged cliff, isolated from the rest of the town. Sumire immediately sensed a heavy, oppressive feeling emanating from the ruin, a sentiment that the client quickly confirmed was the source of the problem. The client explained that the tower was already there when she inherited the land, and that people feel especially sick near it, making her wish she could simply demolish the whole thing. It was almost certain that someone was living inside. Activating his presence detection skill, the skill collector confirmed her suspicions, sensing a single powerful presence dwelling within the dilapidated structure. The client went on to describe the specific problems, explaining that she and her neighbors experienced strange phenomena when they got too close, things that their eyes could see but weren't truly there. They saw things like soldiers from a forgotten age, or birds that couldn't possibly exist, leading Sumire to wonder if a hallucination skill was at play. He confirmed her theory, explaining that hallucination is a fairly common skill that typically only causes the user to see illusions. However, he continued, at higher levels, the skill becomes far more potent, allowing the user to project their conjured world onto others as well, trapping them in a shared illusion. The two women listened with worried expressions, the implications of such a powerful skill user settling in. If the hallucinations were indeed the cause, then someone who had settled in the abandoned property must be actively using the power, making any attempt to approach incredibly difficult. The skill collector, however, remained calm, deciding to handle the situation himself. He believed that with his own unique set of skills, he could deal with the illusions and potentially even purchase the troublesome ability from whoever was causing it. He turned to the girls and instructed them to head back, assuring them he would take care of it from here, much to Sumire's immediate concern. She protested, wanting to help and worrying if he would truly be all right on his own, her voice filled with genuine fear for his safety. He gave her a reassuring smile, telling her that her concern was more than enough and that he would be fine, a kindness that seemed to calm her nerves as she watched him prepare to venture forth alone. With his mind set, he carefully made his approach, his presence detection skill fully active to keep him alert to any changes in the environment. He walked down a narrow path, the strange tower looming in the distance, fully aware that he was stepping into a potentially dangerous and unpredictable territory. The moment he crossed an unseen threshold, the world around him warped violently. The simple grassy path was suddenly a dense, overgrown forest filled with enormous otherworldly flora. In the distance, the ruined tower was gone, replaced by the site of a grand and imposing castle, its ramparts reaching toward the sky. He stood in the shadow of the massive fortress, the illusion so complete and detailed that it felt entirely real, a testament to the incredible power of the skill user. He tried to make sense of the situation, recognizing that the area was supposed to be the site of a ruined tower, yet the castle before him felt strangely familiar, like something from a history book. He recalled a map of the continent from long ago, a time before the great Kinukishif nation when the land was divided into several smaller kingdoms. He realized with a jolt that this was once the site of the Rappi kingdom, a nation that fell 500 years in the past, leading him to question if this was truly a hallucination or if he had somehow traveled back in time. He quickly dismissed the idea of time travel, knowing that only one unique skill in the world could rewind time, making a powerful hallucination the only logical answer. The sheer scale of the illusion was staggering, and he wondered who could possibly wield such power when a sharp voice called out, demanding to know what he was doing there. He turned to find himself surrounded by armored soldiers, their spears and halberds leveled at him, their forms utterly convincing despite being mere illusions. He attempted to apologize and explain himself, but the soldiers were unresponsive, their programmed minds incapable of holding a real conversation. One of the guards, noticing his modern attire, accused him of being a remnant of the Rappi kingdom, a statement dripping with historical irony. He tried to correct their mistake, stating he was not their enemy and simply had business in the castle. But his words fell on deaf ears. The commander dismissed his plea, declaring that a commoner could have no business at the castle, and ordering his men to seize the suspicious intruder and throw him into the dungeon. A flicker of realization crossed the skill collector's face. While being captured was not ideal, it was a direct path inside the castle, and he decided to allow it to happen. The soldiers moved to apprehend him, their movements swift and decisive as they followed their orders. A sharp blow from the butt of a poleaxe struck him from behind, the impact feeling shockingly real as his vision went dark. He awoke in the cold, damp stone corridor of a dungeon, the sound of dripping water echoing off the walls. He found himself bound and thrown into a cell, the iron bars slamming shut behind him as guards stood watch. A guard roughly unlocked his bindings and shoved him deeper into the cell before locking the heavy door, the key turning with a final metallic click. As he sat up, the phantom pain from the blow and the chafing of the ropes felt incredibly authentic, a testament to the illusion's power. It was then that a voice called out to him, a fellow prisoner from across the hall. The man noted his bad luck, explaining that this particular cell was for minor offenders, but unlike them, he would be out in 2 weeks. This confirmed for the skill collector that even the other prisoners were part of the grand hallucination. The prisoners across the way scoffed, revealing they were on death row, identifying themselves as remnants of the Rappi kingdom. The name clicked into place, matching what the illusory soldiers had said. The man explained that after the Rappi kingdom fell, its survivors became slaves. However, he continued, those who were deemed too dangerous or influential weren't enslaved. They were locked away to be executed, a grim fate for the kingdom's loyalists. A man in the adjacent cell, clearly the leader, noticed his presence with a sharp glint in his eye. This man, shackled and worn but with an unbroken spirit, declared that they were not just waiting to be executed. He revealed a list of his formidable skills, hallucination, advanced swordsmanship, sturdy and super strength, and announced that they were biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to break out. He proclaimed that though they lost the war, they would never give up as long as they were alive. In that moment, seeing the man's burning determination, the skill collector found him. This man, seated behind the iron bars of his cell, was undoubtedly the source of the entire hallucination. He stood up and approached the bars, looking directly at the powerful prisoner, who was unknowingly projecting his 500-year-old struggle onto the world. With his target identified, he began to formulate a plan, deciding that the best course of action would be to first earn the man's trust before attempting to negotiate for his hallucination skill. The man looked back at him, his gaze piercing, and asked if he was also one of Rappy's remaining people, revealing that he himself was a former general of the kingdom. A flashback ignited, showing the general in his prime, clad in shining armor and a regal cape, a true hero of his country. He was the strongest warrior in the army, a legendary figure who had cut down countless beasts and men in defense of his home. The general's intense gaze bore into him, noting that he could still see a fighting spirit in the young man's eyes. He asked why that was, his own voice laced with despair as he lamented that he was now nothing more than a death row prisoner, lost and swallowed by the enemy. He explained that his spirit refused to die because he had too many things left undone, his mind flashing back to a time when he was a respected leader, planning strategies with his loyal soldiers. He recalled poring over maps, plotting the subjugation of high-level beasts that threatened the kingdom's northern defenses, a duty he took with the utmost seriousness. His memories drifted to brighter days of riding through the streets to the cheers of grateful citizens, a celebrated hero answering the hopes of his people. And then his thoughts settled on a fateful day at a noble's estate, where he met a very particular person. He remembered pausing on the grand veranda, a faint sound catching his attention. From behind a pillar, a small curious girl peeked out at him, and he kindly asked if she was the daughter of the house. Instead of being shy, the little girl marched right up to him, grabbing his armored gauntlet and asking with startling directness if he was strong. A flustered attendant rushed to pull the child back, apologizing for her unusual boldness, but the general simply confirmed that he was, recounting his victories over monsters, and even an enemy general. The girl looked at him with an unnervingly serious expression, and then asked if he could kill her as well. Taken aback by such a dark request from a child, he knelt down, gently telling her not to be in such a rush to die and to experience the world first. When she asked if he would kill her when she was grown, he couldn't promise that. But he did make her a promise, a simple vow made on a whim to a strange little girl, that he would come to meet her again someday. The memory faded, and the general was once again in the cold darkness of his cell, his face a mask of pure agony as the flames of his lost past swirled around him. He choked out that everything, absolutely everything, had been taken from them. The skill collector listened from his own cell, his expression somber as he absorbed the profound tragedy of the general's story. He knew the truth was far harsher than the general imagined. The war hadn't happened yesterday, it had happened 5 centuries ago. Yet the man spoke of it as if it were the present. The general's spirit, however, remained defiant, his voice ringing with power as he swore he would escape and restore the Rappy kingdom to its former glory. A wave of pity washed over the skill collector. He knew telling this man the truth would be a cruel, painful act, but it was a truth that had to be said. Activating his status resistance, the illusory ropes binding him dissolved into nothing, and with a soft click, the lock on his cell door sprang open, leaving the general stunned and confused. He stood in the open doorway and extended a hand, telling the old warrior that it was time to leave this prison, for there was a world outside that he must face. The general stared in disbelief, demanding to know what he was doing as the very fabric of the illusion began to tear and ripple around them. The stone walls of the dungeon dissolved into light, the entire 500-year-old memory shattering like glass. They were suddenly standing not in a castle, but atop the crumbling ruins of the stone tower, overlooking a peaceful modern village that was utterly alien to the general. The old warrior trembled, unable to comprehend the sight, and the skill collector delivered the final devastating truth. The Rappy kingdom had fallen 500 years ago, and the land they stood on now belonged to the continent's largest nation, Kashif. The general cried out that it was impossible, but the explanation was laid bare. He had likely died long ago, and his profound lingering regrets had bound his soul to this place, powered by his own skill. The 2 girls had returned, and the client added that the previous landowner had told her that things which shouldn't exist would appear whenever people entered the property, confirming the ghostly nature of the phenomena. The weight of 5 centuries crashed down on the general as he finally understood. The soldiers, the castle, the prison, it was all his own creation, and nothing from his era truly remained. The name of his curse, his hallucination skill, hovered in the air like a specter. He fell to his knees, whispering that all he had ever wanted was to protect his people. Crushed by a grief that had festered for half a millennium, he collapsed, clutching his head as he sobbed, blaming the very skill that had kept his memory alive for his unending torment. Watching the spirit's agony, the skill collector knew what he had to do. He couldn't erase the man's pain, but he could at least offer him release from the curse that bound him here. He approached the kneeling spirit and made a simple, direct offer. Would the general allow him to buy his hallucination skill? The general looked up, confused, so the young man explained his own unique ability to purchase skills from others. He assured the spirit that any skill, even a cursed one, could be useful depending on how it was used. He continued, stating that it was his business to collect such unwanted skills, and if this power only brought the general pain and caused trouble for others, then he would gladly take it off his hands. A sliver of hope entered the old warrior's eyes as he asked if the collector could truly put his cursed skill to good use. A question met with a quiet, determined nod. The skill collector explained the single condition: his power required a price. Since he couldn't offer money to a spirit, he proposed to grant a request instead, a form of payment the general immediately understood and accepted. The old warrior, now calm and translucent, prepared to make his one request. His thoughts returned to the strange little girl he had met so long ago, and the promise he had made to see her again, a promise he failed to keep. He asked the skill collector to find out what became of her, to see if she lived a happy life without regrets, and if she had a grave, to apologize on his behalf. The skill collector agreed, asking only for her name. The spirit revealed her name was Kuyori, a noble's daughter from the Rappi kingdom, and at the mention of this name the collector's eyes widened in sudden profound shock. His mind flashed to a grand gated manor, a place he knew well, as he whispered the name Koyori to himself. On a balcony of that very manor, a young woman who looked identical to the child from the general's memory was suddenly struck as a potted plant fell from the roof above, shattering against her head. She sat up from the mess of dirt and ceramic, completely uninjured, but with a look of profound weariness on her face. She murmured that she had died for the first time at dawn today, and that the skill collector was going to scold her again, her identity and her own cursed skill finally revealed. Kuyori, Immortality Level 1.